Good morning. When we look at the energy and climate solutions toolbox, we tend to focus on exciting new technologies like high-powered wind turbines and thin-film solar cells or carbon capture and sequestration. Today's hearing is about the less eye-catching but equally important solutions that improve energy efficiency, build better building and appliance standards, energy efficiency resource standards, demand-side management programs, and the host of other policies and technologies that enable us to use energy more intelligently. The Department of Energy estimates that U.S. electricity demand will grow by 30% by 2030. There are two ways to meet this rising demand: megawatts and negawatts. The first approach is familiar to us, simply building more power plants. The second uses efficiency measures to do more with less. It is based on the reality that the cheapest and cleanest power plant is the one we never have to build. Efficiency costs us little as 1/3 per kilowatt hour of the cost of new electricity supply and emits no carbon. Energy efficiency will also play a critical role in avoiding an excessive dash to natural gas, which many fear could damage the competitiveness of U.S. manufacturing. A recent study by McKinsey & Company concluded that in 2030, efficiency measures can cut U.S. global warming pollution by nearly 15% of current levels at a profit. The 10 northeastern states participating in the RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, cap and auction trade system, have found that by auctioning 100% of the pollution allowances and investing the proceeds in efficiency measures, they can achieve their climate goals at virtually no additional cost to consumers. Climate legislation can provide the resources to make efficiency policies work, while efficiency cuts pollution at the lowest possible cost. These solutions help us to work smarter and not harder. Investing in efficiency is not just a cost-effective energy and climate solution. It will also pay major dividends in new jobs and economic growth. America's efficiency industry already produces close to $1 trillion in annual revenues. By putting America in the vanguard of the efficiency revolution, we can create high-quality green jobs at home while exporting high-quality green technology to the world. Unfortunately, increasing America's energy efficiency is not as straightforward as it may seem. As we will hear from our witnesses, many efficiency improvements can already be achieved today at a profit, but are not being implemented because of market barriers and market failures. For this reason, simply putting a price on carbon is not enough. Focused policies must be used to reward efficiency and to eliminate perverse incentives like those that shackle utilities' profits with the amount of electricity they sell. Progressive states, along with innovative companies like Dow, Johnson Controls, and National Grid, have taken the lead in tackling these challenges. We are grateful to have representatives of these governments and business leaders on our witness panel today. They can help show us the way forward. As Congress considers climate legislation, it will be critical to include policies that make energy efficiency our first fuel. Efficiency provides a vast zero-carbon energy supply that can be deployed right now with current technologies at a net savings. If we are to cut global warming pollution as quickly and as deeply as the science says it must, it is imperative that climate legislation be designed to capture efficiency gains immediately. By making the potential of energy efficiency a reality, we can save the planet while simultaneously saving consumers money, spurring job growth, and meeting our nation's rising energy demand at the lowest possible cost. NBA coach Pat Riley once said, "A particular shot or way of moving the ball can be a player's personal signature, but efficiency of performance is what wins the game for the team." If we are going to beat this energy, climate, and economic challenge, aggressively increasing America's energy efficiency may be at the center of our game plan. That completes the opening statement of the chair. I now turn and recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our hearing today is an important one. The environmental and economic benefits of energy efficiency are truly significant. Before I begin, I'd like to submit a letter from Pilkington, North America for the record. Pilkington is a leading U.S. manufacturer of glass, and they have a facility in my district. Pilkington makes some very interesting points about the nature of energy efficiency. For example, certain building products like windows that are most efficient in southern states are not nearly as efficient in northern states. In the warm weather states of the South, windows that block solar heat are the most energy efficient. However, in the cold weather states of the North, with more heating days than cooling days, such as Massachusetts and Michigan, windows with a higher solar heat gain are more efficient. The right type of window on a cold winter day in Boston or Detroit or Chicago can take in heat from the sun, thus reducing utility bills and saving energy. There was a tax provision in the stimulus bill that promotes windows that are designed primarily for warmer climates. The tax credit is only available for windows that block over 70% of solar heat. According to a website developed jointly by the Center for Sustainable Building Research, Alliance to Save Energy, and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, lower solar heat gains are best for southern climates. The site also recommends for northern states to reduce heating, select the highest solar heat gain you can find so that winter solar gains can offset a portion of the heating energy need. Pilkington said this about the tax provisions that favor southern windows. Quote, "It will result in northern homes using glass that blocks 70% of the sun's free and renewable solar energy from entering the home. That, in turn, will result in unnecessary burning of additional fossil fuels to heat these homes." End quote. That means higher utility bills in northern states and more greenhouse gas emissions. We must recognize regional differences. When it comes to energy efficiency in buildings, one size fits all doesn't always work. In fact, as we see in the window example, it could actually have the opposite effect. I have long been an advocate in spurring efficient technologies into the marketplace. I was proud to work with my colleague, Mrs. Harmon, in passing legislation that improved efficiency standards of the light bulbs. Across the nation, the environmental and economic benefits of more efficient bulbs will, in fact, be substantial. Our work on light bulbs wasn't an arbitrary mandate. We didn't just pick a standard out of the air or look for a catchy sounding standard like 25 by 2025, not based on science or feasibility. Instead, we worked with the industry and environmental groups to come up with a standard that made sense and doable, a standard that can be met by bulbs manufactured in this country, a standard that will include bulbs without any hazardous ingredients such as mercury. If done correctly, increasing the energy efficiency standards can reduce energy costs for consumers, help the environment, and have a positive economic impact. These benefits can be gained without a cap-and-trade program. The question is, what should the federal government's role be? Well-intentioned, it is possible for the government to get it wrong and push policies that will have a detrimental impact on the environmental and pocketbook. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee.
Thank you. I just want to make 2 points. One, we have started last Tuesday, down the efficiency road when President Obama signed the economic recovery bill. And I think over the long term, one of the most productive things in that bill will be the provisions that required governors to certify that they would move towards more efficient building standards of about 30% improvements and decoupling, which will unleash great economic resources for the efficiency industry. It was a small, quiet thing that was little noted on, but I think will unleash tremendous assets for the efficiency industry. Number two, I want to make the point that the efficiency industry is an industry. People think of avoiding waste as something as a void or a vacuum. In fact, it's a tremendous profit and job creation center. And I just want to note, in my little neck of the woods up in Seattle, some companies that are doing right now, just so people know it's not a pipe dream. We've got the Magna Drive company in Bellevue, Washington, manufacturing electrical transmission services that reduces the electrical needs of generators by about 30%. Seattle Steam that does cogen electrical heating that essentially almost doubles the efficiency of a heating plant. McKinstry, which is the world's leading company to help corporations reduce their efficiency, reduce their electrical usage, particularly on server farms. Boeing, which is making the world's most energy efficient jetliner, 20% more energy efficient than any other competitive jetliner. The Verdiem company, which is selling software which significantly reduces a corporation's use of energy in the computer industry. I point these out because one of the largest job creation engines we have in the United States is the efficiency industry, and we intend to continue to adopt policies to help them grow. Thank you.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank my ranking member for bringing up that provision on Windows. I'm surprised I didn't read it. I didn't have enough time to read the bill. But had I read the bill, I might have seen
another
the window issue.
hour on because of daylight savings in just a couple of weeks.
But let me thank the chairman on bringing up this issue on efficiencies. And excuse me if I don't share in the enthusiasm, because for many, many years we've been talking about efficiency gains in the generation of electricity. And we have a federal policy that does just the opposite. And it's one that we've debated here for 12 years, and it's the issue of new source review. And take a power generating plant. I don't care if it's pulverized coal, I don't care if it's gasification. Say that we have a new generator that can generate for the same amount of power output, double the amount of electricity. Now, I would say many of us would say that that is an efficiency gain that should be noted, not punished, not penalized. But what occurs under new source review is that the entire air permitting process has to revolve itself, which is a disincentive. If the boiler's the same, if the emissions the same, if they're meeting air quality standards at the same time and there's no change, but you're going to double the amount of output, that's what we're talking about in efficiency gains. However, since I've been here for 12 years, we continue to provide a disincentive in the new source review debate. And you'll hear the claims it promotes dirty air. Especially if it's in a generator debate, it does no such thing. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope you work with me in reforming the permitting process and streamlining this procedures by which, if we have the same emission standards, whatever they are, and if we're going to have increased efficiency and electricity gains, that we change this capricious new source review program. And I yield back my time.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for convening this hearing today, and thank the witnesses for coming forward with your testimonies. Mr. Chairman, you told us a few weeks ago that you were serious about moving this debate along, and you're absolutely right, and today is evidence that we are ready to move boldly with this initiative. With 40% of the U.S. energy consumption coming from commercial and residential buildings, raising efficiency and greening of our buildings provides a clear path toward lowering our emissions in a relatively low-cost yet highly scalable capacity. In the Southeast, where I'm from, making strides in energy efficiency represents the most readily available means of cutting greenhouse gas emissions. North Carolina, my state, currently has a renewable energy standard, which is helping to drive innovation and deployment of new renewable technologies. However, we remain at a regional disadvantage for access to much of the existing renewable energy options. As such, it is incumbent upon us that we develop policies that place a value on the reduction of greenhouse gases, regardless of the means of achieving that goal. This means focusing on a broad approach, including renewables as well as energy efficiency. I want to comment briefly on a project in my hometown of Wilson, North Carolina, that is saving energy and reducing emissions using effective design and engineering changes. Wilson Community College recently constructed a LEED building, which is a certified green building, as a student center on the campus. I spoke for this dedication, and what I saw exceeded my expectations. We must invest in more green buildings. Studies using DOE assistance indicate that this building will use 50 to 60% less energy than a normal new building of similar size built to existing codes. The center's efficiency improvements will pay for themselves 10 times over in energy savings during the building's lifetime. Energy efficiency is an issue, Mr. Chairman, that is and should be universally supported. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Walden.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this hearing. We also have a communications hearing that's going to take place starting at 10, so I'll apologize to the witness ahead of time. I'll be bouncing back and forth between the two. As I was reading through the testimony in preparation for this hearing, I was struck by the Johnson Controls testimony on the part about how energy efficiency is good for consumers and business, and I believe it is. And I come from a state that has pioneered energy efficiency and conservation. We believe in it strongly. And in the testimony, sir, Mr. Campbell says energy prices are escalating and would continue to rise with a price on carbon. Energy efficiency will reduce the impact of climate policies on consumers' energy bills. It will lower energy spending for American businesses large and small, enabling them to better compete in the global economy. Smarter, more efficient buildings not only have lower utility bills, but also improve health, safety, and comfort. I concur with all of that, except that this committee just passed something that none of us, well, at least those on the Republican side, didn't get a chance to see in advance, and that is this decoupling notion, which, as I understand it, basically says the utilities will have the right to come in and make up their lost revenue that results from energy efficiency. And while some consumers maybe think that's a warm idea, mine are pretty hot about it. They're going to get hotter the more they find out about it. And I'd like to know, Mr. Chairman, at some point, who wrote these positions? Who was in the room when this was written in secret in this bill, since we never had a hearing and only learned about it as we went into markup? And I would hope at some point we'd know who are the lobbyists in the room, who were the legislators in the room. There sure seem to be a lot of folks that know about this, but and how these provisions came to be, but there sure was no public hearing on the legislation. And I would say, too, our area in Oregon is known for its wind energy, and yet I've also seen the hour-by-hour energy production data that indicate that without some sort of peaking power, you can't balance out that load. And so gas does matter. Peaking power is going to be more important the more we go to non-firm power-based generators. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realize I've run out of time.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Waxman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing will explore how energy efficiency can meet our power needs, save us money, create jobs, and help slow global warming. Sometimes the simple solutions are overlooked. Energy efficiency is both the most affordable and fastest source of energy, even though many people don't think of it that way. As several of our witnesses point out in their written testimony, supplying a kilowatt through energy efficiency commonly costs half as much as buying a kilowatt from power generators. And because the cost of efficiency doesn't depend on oil or natural gas prices, efficiency reduces energy costs across the board and their volatility. Businesses across the country find that when they focus on energy efficiency, they can achieve significant cost savings, increasing profits to invest in expansion and new jobs. We'll hear about some of those experiences today. Homeowners find that they can make their houses more comfortable, lower their monthly utility bills, recoup their costs in a few years, and then watch their savings grow. Energy efficiency can also be deployed quickly compared to planning, siting, financing, permitting, and constructing a new power plant. And energy efficiency doesn't require any new or existing transmission capacity. That means efficiency can come online without waiting for transmission upgrades. Energy efficiency is a job engine. Because efficiency gains come in so many forms, efficiency creates opportunities for small businesses and big businesses throughout the economy. These range from construction and engineering jobs, retrofitting buildings, manufacture of efficient products such as next-generation windows and lighting. In building a strong, energy-efficient economy for America, we will help employ workers and give more jobs. For all these reasons, promoting energy efficiency must be a key element of climate legislation. We need substantial efficiency improvements to achieve large greenhouse gas emissions reductions at a reasonable cost. That's why the International Energy Agency concluded that more than half of the emissions reductions required by 2050 globally must come from improvements in energy efficiency. And we know that the experience is that the market by itself won't deliver all of the available low-cost efficiency savings. Homeowners, for example, may know that they could save money by buying a more efficient furnace, but many don't have the capital to make upfront investments. A landlord has a little incentive to weatherize an apartment when the tenant pays the utilities. Local, state, and federal policies have helped successfully address some of these and other barriers. Building codes and appliance standards are two types of policy that saved us huge amounts of energy and money in 1 year alone. For example, the savings from the efficient appliances that qualify for an Energy Star label save as much energy as required by 10 million American homes. You can see the results in a state such as California, which made energy efficiency a priority for decades. Since 1975, California's energy efficiency standards for buildings and appliances have saved residents and businesses $56 billion in energy costs and avoided the need to build 24 major power plants. And today we'll hear about Massachusetts' instructive experience in promoting energy efficiency. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and their recommendations on how we design climate change legislation to best take advantage of the great benefits that energy efficiency offers us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from from Florida, Mr. Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you and the ranking member for this hearing. My staff just was able to get a copy of the stimulus bill that we passed 11 days ago. So it was not humanly possible for us to read it, so we did know of all the intricacies that were in the bill. But for those homeowners that are installing those programmable thermostats, choosing Energy Star qualified appliances and the things that Mr. Waxman, the chairman, mentioned, additional attic installation and replacing old windows and doors with more efficient ones are all cost-effective renovations. Homeowners will be very pleased with these renovations, hoping that it'll make their house more modernized but also more cost-efficient. But because, my colleagues, of the decoupling provisions that was passed in the stimulus bill, which was supported by the majority party, they're going to be surprised. Customers will be forced to pay more energy after they've done all these things I mentioned. The resulting higher energy rates will be especially hard on those elderly people that spend their hard-earned dollars to fix up their homes because their incomes will be fixed, and these individuals will think, well, gee whiz, my energy costs are coming down, but lo and behold, they will not be coming down. Because of their complex structure of this energy utility bills, you hope to obtain achievable energy savings, but you won't see that. So I think that that's a very important part of this hearing. We want to promote energy efficient technologies to reduce energy consumption, but ultimately I think the market has to play a spot here and not Congress in determining the preferred cost-effective technologies and effective and efficient building practices implemented. So I look forward to this hearing, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Global warming, as we all know, is real, it's urgent, and it requires immediate action. And we cannot simply solve this crisis without increasing our energy efficiency. For a nation that consumes more than 25% of the world's energy, we simply can't afford anything less. In Vermont, actually, we've shown that it can be done. We have an energy efficiency utility. It's the nation's first statewide provider of energy efficiency services. And what this pioneering energy efficiency utility has demonstrated is really quite remarkable. First, efficiency works. Thanks to a commitment to investing in efficiency and the effectiveness of Efficiency Vermont, our statewide energy requirements were reduced by 1.74% in 2007. That exceeded the projected rate of load growth, making us the first state to ever turn load growth negative. People said it couldn't be done. Vermont has done it. Second, efficiency is cost effective. The cost of efficiency, as you pointed out, is about 2.6 cents per kilowatt hour compared to 10.7 cents per kilowatt hour for comparable energy. And Vermonters saved money. In 2007, there was an 88% increased savings over 2006. And third, energy efficiency is the path to reducing our carbon emissions. For 2007, Efficiency Vermont's efforts resulted in 661,000 fewer tons of CO2, 562 fewer tons of nitrogen oxides, and 1,100 fewer tons of sulfur dioxide entering the atmosphere. The goal of this committee is to reduce greenhouse gases by 80% by 2050. Many models suggest that energy efficiency can and must provide about 30% of that reduction. And to meet that target, we have to have as a goal about 3% reduction through efficiency each year. Now, Vermont had 2% last year. We can and we must begin to build the on-ramp towards a global warming solution. That on-ramp, simply put, is through efficiency. I yield back.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall.
Chairman, I pass on questions. I'll reserve my time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look forward to the hearing that we're going to have and the testimony from our panel as we develop a comprehensive national energy policy. Efficiency and conservation are definitely part of what needs to be a comprehensive plan that also needs to include the development of our own natural resources to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, but also it's got to include a provision that encourages the development of alternative sources of energy, the renewables like wind and solar, which are not commercially viable enough today to replace the domestic energy that we have, but ultimately we can use that domestic energy as a bridge to get there. But I think if you look at what people are doing in this country, they are conserving. When gas was at $4 a gallon, people were cutting back dramatically, and they haven't changed their habits to a large degree, even though the price has dropped a significant amount. And so I think we need to encourage that conservation and the efficiencies that they've been yielding. One concern that some of us have is that, and we looked at the stimulus bill, and there was a provision, the decoupling provision, that in essence will penalize some people who go and do those things to make their homes more energy efficient. And I think we've got to be very careful in this committee and in the Congress as a whole that we don't penalize people who take those extra steps. If they want to spend what is a large capital outlay to put solar panels on their roof or to put that insulation in their attic, that they're not penalized by having to pay higher utility rates for doing those things. And so we shouldn't discourage good behavior by policy. And unfortunately, that was a provision that got into the stimulus bill. Hopefully, as people across the country realize that and senior citizens realize they may be paying more for energy because they didn't spend $40,000 to put those solar panels up, that's an issue we can revisit because we should avoid policies that discourage people from doing the right thing. And so hopefully we'll look at all of those and all parts of that three-legged stool of a comprehensive energy policy, efficiency and conservation being one of those three. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Mr. Chairman, I'll waive opening statement and for additional questioning time.
Gentleman waives. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow.
Chair, I will waive also.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for calling this hearing today. I'd also like to thank today's panelists. We all appreciate your time and expertise on all these matters. Buildings in our country are responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than any other sector. Heating, cooling, lighting our buildings, as well as powering our appliances requires vast amounts of energy. But thankfully, we currently possess the technology and knowledge needed to address nearly a quarter of our nation's carbon emissions. Improved energy efficiency will be an essential element of any climate change solution. My district of Sacramento, California, has been a leader in adopting green building practices. We have the first LEED Platinum certified office building in the country. We also have the second most LEED certified square footage of any city. We are also home to the California Energy Commission and have been a leader in energy efficiency for over 30 years. Under the leadership of Art Rosenfeld, who's really the godfather of energy efficiency in this country, our state energy commission has kept California's per capita energy consumption flat. Furthermore, federal programs such as Energy Star and Building America are expanding technologies and giving us concrete ways to combat climate change. Last Congress, I introduced a measure to assist homeowners across the country with energy efficiency landscaping practices. Even changing something as simple as how our buildings get sunlight can make a big difference in how much energy they consume. I look forward to working with my colleagues on the subcommittee to examine and promote energy efficiency while helping our constituents to do the same. By saving people money and reducing our carbon emissions, energy efficiency is truly a win-win proposition. Once again, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for highlighting this important issue, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Great. Gentlelady's time is completed. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you for convening this hearing today on such an important issue. Like all of us, I believe that sound energy efficiency measures will certainly help decrease the amount of greenhouse gas emission in our atmosphere. They will also encourage our country to strengthen our energy security and end our dependence on foreign energy resources. However, if energy efficiency matters are not implemented in a cost-effective manner, they will harm our economy. In the recently passed stimulus bill, as has been noted, that we just were able to get a copy of, a potentially very harmful provision was included, decoupling. Decoupling, the separating of utility rates from the amount of electricity or natural gas that utilities sell, will inevitably harm our already damaged economy and those least able to withstand more economic pressure, regular Americans who are struggling to make ends meet during this recession. Under stimulus, if a state accepts federal energy efficiency grants, they will have to guarantee that utilities recover their lost revenue when consumers don't use as much electricity. And this forces the consumer, the ratepayer, to keep utilities solvent, even if their own energy use decreases. With an anticipated decline in energy use in 2009, this policy will force customers to pay more money for less energy, and the government essentially would be punishing people for conserving energy. I believe we must instead create incentives for energy conservation and reward consumers when they save energy, not force them to pay artificially higher utility rates. Utilities have a legitimate concern that increased efficiency will cost them revenue. But if we learned anything from the mortgage crunch, it's that government policies that try to alter or ignore the fundamental laws of economics create more problems than they solve. Penalizing consumers for using less energy doesn't seem like the right solution. And I hope we can all work together and come up with a better alternative. I look forward to hearing the witnesses today, and thank you, and yield back.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing to explore the vital role energy efficiency will play in reducing greenhouse gases and achieving our climate change objectives. I remember so well the image of one of the CEOs of the big oil companies when the gasoline prices were skyrocketing, being challenged, you know, what are we going to do about these high prices? He said, I have one word for you, efficiency. And it holds true in our topic here today as well. I thank our esteemed witnesses for their testimony on this very important matter. Energy efficiency is a win-win. By reducing consumption of energy, we save money, and we also cut greenhouse gases. And the chairman of our full committee, as well as my neighbor from Sacramento, Doris Matsui, have highlighted what has been achieved in California, my state as well, a longtime leader among other states in energy efficiency. We use less energy per capita than any other state in the nation. And as the chairman said, in 1995, since 1975 rather, per capita energy consumption in California has held steady. while in the U.S. as a whole it has grown by 50%. Furthermore, by implementing green energy policies that lower consumption and cut greenhouse gases, we've managed to spend less. On average, California families now spend $800 a year less on energy than they would have without the efficiency advancements of the last 3 decades. We have managed to cut also per capita carbon dioxide emissions by 30% over the last 30 years. These successes have come as a result of strong standards combined with innovative regulations and innovative achievements. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the leadership of this committee and of our administration for setting some high goals. And as we move forward to craft climate legislation, consider the complementary policies necessary to reduce greenhouse gases. I hope we will recognize some groundbreaking work that is already occurring in California, Massachusetts, some other places, and that will build smart climate policy on their achievements, on the achievements that have been already accomplished in local communities. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Great. Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess.
I thank the chairman for the recognition. Thank you for holding this hearing. Looking forward to hearing from our panel of witnesses today. Energy efficiency is exactly the type of issue where we can work together on this committee despite our clear differences on carbon control regimes. Energy efficiency is the type of win-win scenario that people seek in public policy decisions before Congress. But we need to ensure that the consumers of electricity receive the cost savings from energy efficiency and that this does not accrue to the electric utilities. The incentive to implement energy efficiency technology must provide direct benefits to the end users who ultimately pay the rates, the families, the small businesses, and the manufacturers. Unfortunately, the revenue decoupling portion in the economic stimulus bill redirected these benefits to the utilities so that consumers pay the same price no matter how much energy they consume or save. I hope that this committee can work together to correct this provision and redirect the benefits of energy efficiency back to ratepayers. And this is not just a hypothetical concern with me, Mr. Chairman. A few years ago, my wife and I found ourselves building a new home. And the number of things that were available off the shelf for energy efficiency really made an impression upon me. We already heard from a member on the other side, things like siting your house correctly to take advantage of passive solar heating if you're in a climate that where that will be a benefit. The ultra-high efficiency air conditioners that are available nowadays, foam insulation in the walls, low-E glass, the tankless water heater, the efficient attic system. Our electric utility rates dropped 1/2 the summer we moved into this house, which was the same square footage as the house we had occupied the previous summer. Our natural gas consumption similarly declined by about 1/2, demonstrating the powerful effect of energy efficiency. Again, this is an area where we can all agree that that improvements can be made. I want to be certain, though, that the decisions we make in this committee do not increase the cost of development and increase the cost of manufacturing, because the economy right now cannot tolerate that type of convulsion. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gonzalez. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the past 2 years, this subcommittee has heard about emerging technologies, necessary investments in research, and critical infrastructure that must be developed if we are to reduce our energy use and lower our greenhouse gas emissions. We have focused on carbon sequestration, cellulosic ethanol, and plug-in hybrid vehicles as solutions to our energy and climate change crises. These are important discussions to have, but in looking toward the future, we cannot lose sight of the significant energy savings that are currently available to us. Today, by having a thorough discussion of energy efficiency opportunities, we draw attention to low-cost strategies that can be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm particularly interested in how the industrial sector can optimize its energy use. In December, the Oak Ridge National Laboratory released a report saying that waste energy recovery is, I quote, one of the most promising options in the U.S. energy efficiency portfolio. I am pleased with a number of the provisions included in the Energy Independence and Security Act that encourage waste heat recovery, and I look forward to hearing about other opportunities that we may be able to make available. Finally, I want to welcome all of our witnesses here today, but one in particular. Mr. Ian Campbell is here representing Johnson Controls, which is headquartered just outside my district in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Johnson Controls is a leader in innovation, building batteries for the next generation of plug-in hybrid vehicles and addressing efficiency in buildings to help manage energy costs, reduce environmental impacts, and improve productivity and competitiveness. But I would add that Johnson Controls doesn't just talk the talk. Rather, they have taken significant steps to improve their own efficiencies and reduce their own carbon footprint. And through it all, they've continued growing. I thank you for your company's commitment to environmental stewardship and corporate responsibility, and welcome your testimony as well as the testimony of the entire panel that we're very grateful to have before us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Blum.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I'll submit a statement later for the record.
Great. Then that completes all opening statements by the members, and we'll now turn to our very distinguished panel and hear from our first witness. Our first witness is Phil Giudice, who is the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. He has over 30 years of experience in the energy industry and currently serves on the boards of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and the Massachusetts Renewable Energy Trust. We look forward to your testimony. Whenever you're ready, please begin.
Thank you, Chairman Markey and the committee. On behalf of Governor Patrick, Secretary Bowles, all of Massachusetts, and all of the state energy offices, I thank you not only for your longstanding leadership on energy and climate matters, but for your aggressive support for the clean energy features of the recently passed stimulus package. Funding for the state energy program, the weatherization assistance program, the energy efficiency and conservation block grants, and the appliance energy rebates, among many other programs in the stimulus package, will be put to good use in Massachusetts and elsewhere around the country. In 1990, when the State Energy Efficiency Programs Improvement Act was passed, you were the chief sponsor, Chairman Markey. This has allowed the SEP programs to serve as a ready-to-use vehicle across the country for distributing a significant portion of these stimulus dollars. Every year, you have led the effort in the House of Representatives to increase funding for SEP, weatherization, and LIHEAP. These are important for Massachusetts and our country. Thank you. Further, we are proud to strongly support your recently filed Save American Energy Act, and we look forward to working with you, the committee, the Massachusetts delegation, Congress, and the administration to advance boldly federal energy and climate policies this session. If you take away only one thing from my comments today, it is this: energy efficiency is a proven, reliable, and an extremely valuable tool for building a greener energy future. It is also a tool that we can quickly deploy to reinvest in our homes, businesses, starting today in ways that will begin to turn around our economy and in the longer term will put the United States at the hub of a 21st century global clean energy economy. As Governor Patrick has said about Massachusetts, if we get clean energy right, the world will be our customer. And in the context of your consideration of federal climate legislation, it is also clear, based on our long experience in Massachusetts with efficiency programs and our short but valuable experience with carbon caps through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, that energy efficiency is the best climate mitigation tool that we have and a powerful economic driver for our economies. I know you are well acquainted with our existing efficiency programs and policies in Massachusetts, but I want to take this opportunity to share for the record some of the lessons and provide a glimpse of the transformation that is underway in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has historically had some of the highest cost of energy in the country, but our innovative people have combined to establish us as a leader in efficiency. Our energy productivity of the state is one of the highest in the nation, with our economy generating $200 of gross state product for every million BTUs of energy consumed. The U.S. average is $116 per million BTUs consumed. Efficiency and economic growth can and do go hand in hand in Massachusetts. Massachusetts' long distinguished record investing in energy efficiency is delivering great results. We have continuously invested for over 3 decades. We collect about 1/4 of a penny for every kilowatt hour that is distributed by our regulated utilities in wide-ranging and far-reaching energy efficiency programs. Totals about $125 million a year, which is about $20 per person in the state of Massachusetts. On the U.S. total through regulated utility programs is spending about $2.5 billion, or about $8. So we're about 2.5 times the national average. These programs result in saving energy at a cost of about 3.6 cents a kilowatt hour and contribute to an overall savings of 8% of the kilowatt hours that we would otherwise be consuming in Massachusetts. So this is a great deal, especially when the annual cost of power from generation in the wholesale market averages 8 or more cents a kilowatt hour. But we are not resting on these accomplishments. In fact, we at this moment are in the process of transforming our energy efficiency infrastructure and our approaches. And this effort is producing remarkable results. The transformation began with Governor Patrick and our legislature's leadership to fundamentally change the equation for investing in efficiency. Instead of investing a prescribed amount of the 2.5 mils that we're collecting and getting as much energy efficiency that we could with that sum of money, we are now required by law to invest in all energy efficiency that is less expensive than supply sources. And we expect this will double, triple, or more our efficiency spending and the results that we will be getting from our efficiency programs. This transformation is largely being accelerated by investing the revenues from our participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We've had 2 auctions, and we've generated almost $30 million that are going directly into these programs in Massachusetts, and will be further turbocharged by the recently passed federal stimulus. This will mean more energy auditors, more contractors working on insulation and air sealing in homes and businesses, and improving our building stock, more plumbers and HVAC control technicians to change out the inefficient equipment and put in much more efficient. All kinds of organizations are taking charge of becoming energy leaders. As you well know, Mr. Chairman, Massachusetts is proud of its professional sports teams. And in addition to winning 6 championship banners in the last 7 years, each of our sports teams, the Red Sox and New England Patriots, are doing fantastic things from their energy consumption. So I ask you at this moment to go much bolder than we will necessarily be comfortable for. And because in the future, we will look back and wish we were taking bold steps at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Our next witness is Mr. Thomas King, who is the president of National Grid in the United States. Before joining National Grid, Mr. King spent 10 years with Pacific Gas and Electric Company, where he was chairman and CEO. We're very happy to have you with us here today, sir. Whenever you're ready, please begin.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Upton, and members of the committee, I want to thank you for including National Grid in this very important hearing on energy efficiency. May I first congratulate you and your congressional colleagues for your focus and success with important initiatives on energy efficiency, renewables, infrastructure such as smart grid, and other critical energy support in last week's stimulus bill. Mr. Chairman, we are also pleased with the directional approach you have introduced with initiatives that address both energy efficiency resource standard and renewable energy. There is no single solution with our overall energy policy. We need more expansive, robust energy efficiency programs. We need new sources of renewable energy, wind, solar, biomass, geothermal. We need comprehensive strategy to address our transmission infrastructure, including policies that will enable us to bring renewable energy to load centers, and we need smart grid technology and smart meters to maximize the potential of current and future energy technologies through efficiency and automation. All of these actions play a critical role in an effective national energy policy. While the national energy strategy must be multifaceted, my comments today will focus on energy efficiency. Energy efficiency uniquely addresses many of our nation's core energy issues. It is more cost-effective than building new power plants, has the potential to dramatically lower greenhouse gas emissions, and provides consumers with long-term savings on their energy bills. Let me begin with some simple facts on the cost-effectiveness of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency can cost as little as 3 cents per kilowatt hour saved, while electricity costs 6 to 12 cents per kilowatt hour. As a country, we spend about $215 billion annually on production of electricity, but we only invest $2.6 billion on energy efficiency. For natural gas, efficiency costs range $1 to $2 per 1,000 cubic foot consumed, compared to a typical market cost ranging from $6 to $8 per MCF. Yet we spend approximately $91 billion annually on natural gas and only $500 million on efficiency of natural gas. This country must take better advantage of this opportunity and prioritize energy efficiency. National Grid's experience with energy efficiency programs in Massachusetts can be a model for the rest of the country, and the successful programs include comprehensive whole house efficiency approaches, energy audits, high efficiency lighting, HVAC installation to assure efficiency, energy efficiency services to low-income customers, business customer assistance to implement energy savings, and weatherization initiatives. On the gas side, the programs include high efficiency appliances, weatherization, and system controls, including automatic thermostats. I congratulate Governor Deval Patrick and the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for passing comprehensive energy legislation in Massachusetts, the 2008 Green Communities Act. This provision will allow National Grid to expand our efficiency programs by 300 to 400% over the next 5 years. National Grid, in partnership with other leading energy companies such as PG&E, DT&E, environmental groups such as the National Resource Defense Council and Environmental Defense, worked together with McKinsey & Company to look at energy efficiency. The landmark study found that the U.S. can make substantial emissions by 2030 without damaging the economy with the help of energy efficiency. The Electric Power and Research Institute recently introduced its own energy efficiency savings analysis. By analyzing the impacts of codes and standards as well as market-driven efficiency, the study shows measurable reductions in energy consumption. In addition to energy efficiency, we will need a national policy such as mandatory cap-and-trade program. As consumers bear the cost of addressing climate change in the form of higher energy prices, climate change policies must be designed to mitigate that impact. One of the most effective and transparent ways to simultaneously address consumer cost and energy efficiency is to distribute allowances to the local distribution companies with a mandate that the value be returned expeditiously to the customers to reduce their energy bills. Current state enforcement power and rigorous open reporting will ensure that all allowance values allocated to the LDCs do benefit the customers. LDCs are uniquely positioned to administer community-based energy efficiency programs because they already have the necessary experience, communication channels, marketing expertise, funding and oversight processes, and access to the place in the market to move things quickly. National Grid already has efficiency programs in place that are saving customers in New England over $250 million a year. As a result of these programs, National Grid's customers have saved more than $3.6 billion in energy costs. In 2007 alone, our gas programs saved 4.6 million thermal units and avoided 27,000 tons of CO2, and our electricity programs saved 380,000 megawatts, avoiding 218 tons of CO2. This is a total carbon emission equivalent of taking 48,000 cars off the road a year. Expansion of such programs as a result of these creates energy efficiency jobs. Energy efficiency should act as the foundation of our national energy policy, and importantly, we need to move quickly. I commend your work and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King, very much. Our next witness is Rich Wells, who is the Vice President of Energy for the Dow Chemical Company. He's a member of the Board of Directors of the Alliance to Save Energy, and in 2008 was appointed to the Michigan Climate Change Action Council by Governor Jennifer Granholm. We thank you for being with us today, sir.
Chairman Markey, Representative Upton, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide our views on energy efficiency and its role in the future energy and climate change policies of our country. First, I'd like to address the role energy plays for Dow. As one of the largest chemicals and plastics producers, Dow uses the equivalent of 850,000 barrels of oil every day in its global operations. Of this total, approximately half is in the United States. Energy used by Dow is converted into a wide variety of products essential to our economy and our citizens' quality of life. These products serve as building blocks for everything from pharmaceuticals, insulation, electronic materials, infrastructure, and much more. With energy being a key enabler for all of our products, it is no surprise that the volatility of energy prices over the last 6 years has had a dramatic impact on Dow. In 2002, our total annual energy and feedstock bill was $8 billion. In 2008, that number climbed to over $27 billion. Dow has an energy efficiency and conservation program which has been refined over the past 2 decades. This program, through its energy savings, has allowed us to sustain our operation despite these rising energy costs. Let me give you some examples of the impressive results from that program. We have saved over 1,600 trillion BTUs of energy since 1994, which is enough energy to power every home in California for 1 year. We have saved $8.6 billion in energy costs over the past 14 years, and these energy savings have prevented 86 million metric tons of CO2 from entering our atmosphere. Dow's efforts in energy efficiency have been recognized by the EPA, who named our company an Energy Star Partner of the Year in 2008. We have been involved in energy efficiency outreach efforts both in the U.S. and internationally, including China. Despite being a very energy-intensive company, Dow provides products that help consumers save energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, the emissions avoided by use of Dow thermal insulation are 7 times greater than our total corporate emissions. As you can see, Dow is committed to energy efficiency. It's the quickest, cheapest, cleanest way to extend our nation's energy supplies and reduce carbon emissions. That is why we recommend Congress implement the following complementary policies for energy efficiency. First, strengthen building energy codes by 30% starting in 2012 and 50% by 2020. These building code improvements could save up to 6 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions by 2050. Second, implement a federal energy efficiency resource standard. Estimates show that by 2020, a federal EERS could reduce peak electrical demand by 90,000 megawatts, cut CO2 emissions by 260 million metric tons, and create 260,000 net jobs. Third, increase the payback periods on low-interest loans to industry for energy efficiency projects. These projects would improve energy efficiency within the private sector, stimulate the economy, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, re-energize the DOE Industrial Technologies Program. Strengthen the program by placing greater emphasis on early-stage R&D, as well as expanding focus on cogeneration and recycled energy. Dow supports the prompt enactment of an environmentally effective and economically sustainable cap-and-trade program. As a member of U.S. CAP, Dow supports an 80% reduction in CO2 emissions by the year 2050. However, we need to be thoughtful when designing climate policy. Too strong a price signal on carbon in the short term could accelerate fuel switching from coal to natural gas in the power generation sector. Such a movement could trigger a steep demand for natural gas, dramatically driving up prices and harming manufacturers, including Dow. Combined with other well-designed climate policy elements, complementary energy efficiency measures can lessen the impact of fuel switching under a cap-and-trade program. In conclusion, Congress should pass cap-and-trade legislation with complementary measures in order to drive energy efficiency through all phases of climate policy. If we fail to do so, we risk negative impacts and burdens on all sectors of our economy, including our manufacturing base. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'll be happy to answer your questions when it's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, and I know about your great work. There's an interesting book that's said really good things about Dow. I'll tell you about that later. Mr. Campbell.
You need to hit that button on the mic.
I'm sorry. Chairman Markey and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on complementary policies for climate legislation. Johnson Controls is a world leader in providing energy efficiency products, technologies, and services for buildings, and we would like to share an on-the-ground view of the opportunities and barriers to energy efficiency. Some refer to energy efficiency as the fifth fuel, a new source of energy that we can tap to drive economic growth. We believe that energy efficiency should be considered the first fuel, as it saves consumers and businesses money through lower energy consumption and represents the lowest cost source of energy using technologies widely available today. In the first of 3 key points that we wish to make, we believe that a variety of complementary policies are needed to drive energy efficiency. In addition to putting a price on carbon, we support time-of-use pricing and smart grid investments to give energy users and their building management systems the information that they need to make smart decisions. We support energy efficiency resource standards such as the legislation Representative Markey has recently introduced. Such a standard would dramatically ramp up efficiency investments while providing a path for utilities to cost-effectively decrease their overall emissions. Building codes and equipment standards represent important policy levers. We support policies to provide incentives for the purchase of the highest efficiency equipment to drive innovation and enable manufacturing scale. We also support the introduction of a system to label building performance to help better inform current and prospective building owners and ultimately increase demand for high-performance buildings. With approximately 1 billion square feet of annual new construction, establishing complementary policies to enhance energy efficiency in new buildings is an important step. But to the second of our three key points, these opportunities are dwarfed by the prospects of enhancing energy efficiency in the approximately 72 billion square feet of existing non-residential building stock. There are a range of barriers that prevent the raising of energy efficiency levels in existing buildings that have effectively been addressed in the public sector using an approach known as performance contracting. Performance contracting is a competitive market-based approach to delivering energy and operational savings that leverages public funding with private investment. This programmatic approach to retrofitting buildings can combine energy efficiency and renewable energy in a single cost-effective project. The energy performance guarantees provided under these contracts ensure transparency and accountability for project outcomes, a critical element of any successful energy and climate policy. Performance contracting has been successfully applied in the public sector for over 20 years. Examples include the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, where a $42 million investment funded through public and private sources delivered $56 million in guaranteed energy and operational savings, as well as an improved learning environment for students and faculty alike. And Wyandotte Public Schools in Michigan implemented a combination of energy efficiency retrofits, technology upgrades, and solar PV installation that delivered significant savings and helped the school district become the first in Michigan to be fully certified under the EPA's Energy Star program. While performance contracting has been successful in the public sector, there are barriers to the adoption of this model in the private sector. The mismatch of incentives between property owners and tenants, the frequency of turnover in building ownership, and the requirement to use building assets as collateral to secure loans. To address this, we recommend establishing a program that would encourage large-scale deep retrofitting of privately owned commercial buildings. The program should provide incentives for efficiency improvements in the form of rebates provided to building owners or their agents in proportion to verified and sustained performance improvements, and loan guarantees to help attract capital from private sources to fund those improvements. Our third and final point is that these complementary energy efficiency policies have the potential to create a substantial wave of new green-collar jobs across the country. Developing this workforce will require a combination of public and private investment, along with the creation of certification programs to ensure that workers have the right skills and training to engineer, install, and maintain energy efficiency projects. Finally, let me note that included in my written testimony are a number of consensus recommendations from a coalition of energy efficiency organizations, including Johnson Controls, entitled Reducing the Cost of Addressing Climate Change Through Energy Efficiency. In closing, Johnson Controls believes in the need to increase the nation's focus and investment in energy efficiency. Energy efficiency must be the first priority in addressing climate change as a way of containing the cost of climate protection and creating new jobs. It is imperative as a nation that we focus on efficiency now. It has never been more important. On behalf of Johnson Controls, thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Mr. Campbell, excuse my failure to introduce you to to the group. Mr. Campbell, who just gave us a really interesting discussion, is Vice President, General Manager of the North American Service and Global Workplace Solutions for Johnson Controls. Thank you very much. Our next witness is Dr. John Anderson, President and CEO of the Electricity Consumers Resource Council. His organization represents large industrial electricity consumers from virtually every sector of the manufacturing community. Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Upton and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to be here today. I don't have to tell the members of this subcommittee that we are in troubled times, and these times are especially troubling for manufacturers. Speaking personally, I don't see a light at the end of this very dark tunnel in the near future. As the subcommittee in Congress debate energy policy, I urge you to think very carefully about what the proposed policies will do to the electricity cost for consumers, whether industrial consumers will be able to bear these costs, and if, instead, they will have to close additional manufacturing facilities and move to lower-cost locations. We want to avoid that situation. Which brings me to the subject of this hearing, energy efficiency. At the outset, I emphasize that ELCON does not doubt that many opportunities exist to improve energy efficiency of manufacturing processes and that such improvements would help reduce greenhouse gases. However, most large industrial facilities are beyond the point where substantial savings can be achieved with plug-and-play measures such as high-efficiency light bulbs or insulation or motors. The next level of efficiency gains are achieved when entire industrial processes are retooled or rebuilt and options are explored, such as combined heating and power. These are big-ticket items requiring very large outlays of capital over long periods of time. Further complicating this problem is the current credit crunch. The core issue is, can utility financing of energy efficiency investments compete with large industrial's own ability to raise capital on its own in normal capital markets? A question we ask consistently, are utilities better banks than banks are? And that may be a difficult question to answer today, but we don't think so. Again, I emphasize that the industrial customers are strong advocates, even activists, of cost-effective energy efficiency. Such manufacturers are in a constant quest to reduce operating costs to increase competitiveness. But at the same time, large industrial customers have historically not supported legislative or regulatory mandates for utility-implemented energy efficiencies. Such programs are both costly and not designed in a manner that would achieve maximum efficiency gains. I raise 4 other related issues that are often discussed in the context of achieving greater energy efficiency, and I address them in much more detail in my written statements. First is the energy efficiency resource standards that has been already mentioned today. ELCON has not taken a formal position on the EERS. We certainly support measures that result in the implementation of cost-effective energy efficiency. However, there are some very basic questions that any EERS would raise, and those I touch in my written comments. If an EERS is actually implemented, we strongly urge that industrial facilities be exempt, recognizing that they already have taken significant energy efficiency steps and knowing that this is not the time to layer additional cost on manufacturers. The second issue I raise is revenue decoupling, which is one that has been mentioned several times here already. The debate over the stimulus bill demonstrated the great opposition to federally mandated revenue decoupling from both small and large customers alike. We disagree with the advocates of revenue decoupling for several reasons. First, we believe that revenue decoupling disrupts and distorts the utility's core business functions to produce and deliver electricity in an efficient manner and is not a particularly effective way of promoting energy efficiency. Moreover, there are better ways to deliver cost-effective energy efficiency, such as with a third-party entity rather than a utility. There's no basic conflict between implementation of energy efficiency through an independent third party and the loss of revenues for a utility. Second, several states have found decoupling to be a failure once policy recognizes that a cool summer or a warm winter or an economic downturn triggers increased revenues to the utility even if no efficiency gains are made. Third, we question why a regulated public utility that has been given a monopoly service territory by a state should be rewarded for implementing an efficiency program that is required by either federal or state mandates. We believe they have an obligation to serve and should be given an opportunity to recover prudently incurred costs and earn a return that reflects risks they incur, but no more. And finally, many proponents of decoupling hold California up as a poster child for energy efficiency, at least partially because decoupling advocates assert that per capita consumption of kilowatt hours in California was reduced. However, California also implemented an inverted rate structure that may have had in and of itself brought about more energy efficiency than decoupling that was implemented and then taken away and then put back. And California's very high electric rates have contributed to the tremendous loss of manufacturing in the state. It's not hard to reduce electricity consumption if you take away your manufacturing base and put people out of work. The third issue I raise is demand response, and I'm not going to go into that in detail in my oral statements, but I urge you to look at it. We think it has a tremendous potential, and it ought to be considered along with energy efficiency measure. And the fourth issue is the utilization of combined heat and power, which was mentioned at least once. Manufacturing industries have been leaders in this effort. Unfortunately, companies planning to increase their CHP production have been disappointed by a recent rulemaking process at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. Specifically, ELCON worked with members of this subcommittee, led by Representatives Barton, Boucher, and others, in drafting compromise language, the intent of which was to continue certain incentives for combined heat and power as provided for under PURPA and until truly competitive markets were established. Unfortunately, things just didn't work out as expected. FERC's rule, in essence, discontinued those incentives for any facility operating in one of the FERC-approved RTOs or ISOs. This rule will clearly hinder CHP growth. We strongly urge Congress to either reconsider the language in EPAC 2005 to more accurately reflect congressional intent or address this issue in an oversight hearing. In conclusion, I return to where I started. Basic manufacturing in the U.S. is in terrible shape. Despite the well-intentioned stimulus package, I have seen no projections that manufacturing output will increase in the near future. Yet many in Congress and elsewhere seem intent on implementing several new and substantial energy initiatives. All have noble goals, but many will work to the detriment of industrial companies and their employees. I applaud the subcommittee for seeking to make our energy market more efficient, but I ask the subcommittee, when considering energy legislation, to examine the total impact of its proposals, including its impacts on the manufacturing sector. I urge you to consider several specific recommendations that are in my written testimony. I thank you again for the opportunity to be before you today and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And our last witness is Mr. Brian Reichel, who's Chairman and President and CEO of Pure Choice Incorporated. Pure Choice provides building performance reporting software and helps organizations with their energy efficiency. Thank you, Mr. Reichel.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank Chairman Markey and Ranking Member Upton and the members of the subcommittee for inviting me here today. My name is Brian Reichel. I'm president of Pure Choice, Burnsville, Minnesota. We are an Energy Star partner. I will summarize my testimony, but I ask that it be included in the record as submitted. But what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit different story today. Instead of telling you what I think we can do, I'm going to tell you what we are doing today as a small company in Minnesota. There's been talk about looking for shovel-ready projects, and we are about as shovel-ready as they go. The main reason for energy use in commercial buildings is to condition the space for human occupancy. There are approximately 5 million existing commercial buildings in the U.S. today, totaling well over 70 billion square feet. Consider then that according to the Department of Energy, about 33% of the energy used in those buildings is used specifically for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. The average cost of that is about $1.23 a square foot, or about $86 billion annually. There's been talk of increasing the energy efficient goals up to 10, 20, 30, now you hear 50%, but I ask the question, without first measuring the building for the performance of the building, how do you know that that building can even attain better energy efficiency? We need to somehow measure the performance of the building. I can achieve 100% energy efficiency in this particular building if somebody would show me to the breaker panel, I'll shut all the switches off. However, we screw up the interior environment of this building. So there has to be a balance somehow between energy efficiency goals and our indoor air quality goals, which is the reason a lot of these codes were put into place in the first time. Pure Choice takes a bit of a different approach. We actually measure the interior performance of the building. We measure temperature and humidity and carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and VOCs, which are basically odors and gases. I brought with me today one of our mechanical pieces. It's called the nose. The nose houses all these particular sensors on a single platform, and it's delivered every 20 seconds back to our server in Minnesota that's on a secure site. We then put it out with our building performance software, which is called PureTrack. PureTrack is a web-based data collection software that functions very much like a continuous energy audit. Essentially, we're continuously commissioning the building all the time. Every building has an operating strategy. On a continuous basis, the software checks the overall performance of the building against that particular operating strategy, and at the end of the month, we generate a report, and we tell you how efficient your building is to that particular operating strategy. I can tell you we have no customers that are 100%. We have some customers in the 15 to 20% range, and they had no idea. And on a simple basis, if you're spending $10,000 a month on energy and you're 50% efficient, that's $5,000 that you've got room to find. I'll give you an example of what we've done. We recently partnered with the federal government at the Henry Bishop Whipple building in Minneapolis. It's located at Fort Snelling. The GSA, the Department of Energy, and the Minnesota Department of Commerce were our partners on the project. We monitored the building for 1 year. The partners identified opportunities for energy savings, and we modified the operation strategy. We realized a savings in excess of 20% in 1 year without compromising indoor air quality and without purchasing any additional HVAC equipment. The energy saving opportunity was in excess of $144,000. The payback was less than 2.2 years, fully funded. Now, the GSA was so pleased with that study that you may have seen this before. They've included it in their Sustainability Matters document. I have submitted some of those for the committee in just an excerpt form to show you. On page 94 to 99, it is the center of their Bible going forward on how they achieve green and high-performance buildings. The President has placed a priority on this. Congress recently passed $4.5 billion in a stimulus for energy conservation. We can achieve that in a very simplistic format, and I'll tell you, if the GSA just wanted to do all their federal buildings, they'd spend less than $40 million and save approximately $60 million a year. And that's the bottom line, just to give you how much of this is available. I'll give you another example. We recently partnered with a big box retailer in the city of Chicago. Chicago's got some of the strictest building codes in the country as far as ventilation is required. The major retailer couldn't meet their energy efficiency goals and achieve their indoor air quality goals at the same time. They used our peer track data, and the city gave them a variance on the ventilation rate, and they were able to cut ventilation by over 54%, but because they were able to electronically prove that they matched the indoor air quality guidelines of the code, that 54% averaged into $2,500 a month per store in real-time savings. They didn't disqualify the indoor air quality of the building, and they met all the requirements of the code. Currently, the technology is being used by Tulsa University. It's being taught in the engineering program at Stout University. We have partnered with Secretary Chu's old company, Lawrence Berkeley Labs. We've done 3 school studies with them. Dr. Michael Apte has been our project partner out there. The study that we did in the schools found that the worse the air quality was in schools, the higher the absenteeism. For every 1,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide, absenteeism went up 10 to 20%. Minnesota Power and the Minnesota Department of Commerce had us do another program called Sample 2, School Air Monitoring Program for Learning and Energy Efficiency. We did 3 schools in Minnesota, and the findings averaged that 14% of the school, or we could save an average of 14% of energy conservation, which was approximately $30,000 per school. If we take that across what Senator Boxer has proposed, we'd save in excess of $580 million annually using 2003 energy numbers on all the public schools in this country. This technology works. We're here today talking about how do we do energy efficiency. You need to measure the performance of the building, and we can turn everything else around. We've got some suggestions. I look forward to your questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We'd like to go to Mr. Upton first in recognition of his great work on lighting last year.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'd like to make a couple points. First of all, when we dealt with the energy title as part of the stimulus bill, that moved through this committee, and those provisions actually passed by voice. I don't think there's any opposition to having incentives for improving our energy efficiency in really any sector of our economy. However, there was one rather contentious item that we debated, and Mr. Anderson, you touched on it, and that was the decoupling issue. And I want to just pass a chart out. I don't know, Mike, can you do this? To my colleagues and members of the panel on both sides here. This was printed by the Department of Energy, and it appeared in CQ Today back last month. And it talked a little bit about decoupling. And Mr. Wells I have Western Michigan University in my district, and I want to think that every one of our rooms in the 50-some buildings on campus now have a Johnson's Control sensor, and it works. It saves the university hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in heating costs that we're able to see. We have schools in my district that have now passed, have achieved the Energy Star rating. It's terrific in terms of what we have. And as you look at the strides that we made on appliance standards, building standards, light bulbs, one of the issues that this subcommittee worked on and was able to pass in the Congress. Wind turbines last week in my district, again, we looked at both residential and some of the giant 80-meter types that are there. We can save great amounts of energy, but if you impose this decoupling on states, and this chart illustrates that, again, from the Department of Energy, you don't actually, at least my reading of it, you don't actually see the savings. The incentives to purchase that additional equipment, at the end of the day, the utilities are able to add increases in that rate, and you don't see the same savings. I mean, it would be like buying a hybrid automobile, and instead of paying the normal gas price, they'll just say, well, you drive a hybrid, so we're going to charge you another 25 cents a gallon at the pump to make up for what you're not giving to Exxon or BP or somebody else. And I'd like each of you maybe to just comment. It's a fairly simple chart here that was printed by the Department of Energy, but as you can see, it's got the original billing for residence, office buildings, and industrial buildings, and then it's got the decoupled buildings with the high users pay a little bit less, but the low users pay considerably more. And I just think that it takes away the incentive for folks, businesses, or homeowners to actually install the devices that are going to save energy and make us less energy reliant on other sources. And Mr. Reichel, if you'd like to just start and make your comment based on this chart, and we'll just go down the line in the time that I have remaining.
Thank you, sir, but I don't have any position on the decoupling. In fact, the last time I heard the word decoupling was at my dog breeders. So I can't partake to that.
Okay. Glad this isn't in the big house downstairs live on C-SPAN. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Upton. I have not seen this chart before, so I can't really respond to it. Let me say a couple of things about decoupling that I said a little more in my written statement, and we actually have a publication on it that I'd like to ask if it can be inserted into this record. Decoupling it does, as you said, it does increase rates. That's what it does. Now, the increased rates may bring about reduced consumption, and for some customers there could be a reduced bill. But for other customers, there won't be a reduced bill.
That's right. It rewards the folks that don't do as much as the folks that might invest in energy conservation.
And that, to me, boils it down to...
That's a good answer. Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can comment deeply around the decoupling provisions, but what I can say is that for energy efficiency to work, there has to be alignment of incentives so that when energy efficiency is being driven and achieved, there has to be incentives appropriate to that.
I'm running out of time, so we got to go fast. Mr. Wells.
I will echo what Mr. Campbell says. A lot of us have talked about the energy efficiency improvements we've done in our companies. The question is, why hasn't that happened in the public sector? It's because we've got split incentives, and we've got to find a way to break that.
Mr. King.
Thank you. There are numerous issues associated with rate design. I think the incentive component is critical, as well as there is an ability through the rate design to mitigate some of the low-income, low-user impacts that can be dealt with state by state as we deal with decoupling.
Mr. Goodhams.
Yes, from my perspective, decoupling is neither the panacea or the cause of what ails us. It is just one of the tools that can be useful done right to help make sure we move forward. And the stimulus bill does not require decoupling. In my read, it requires governors to assert that they're going to work towards minimizing disincentives for efficiency, as well as move to better building codes.
Great. The gentleman's time has expired. So that's an important point that you made, Mr. Giudice, that it's not mandated. And if you just elaborate upon that for another 30 seconds, please.
Sure. The national state energy officials actually worked with committee members when looking at this issue, because decoupling is a third rail hot issue across the country. Lots of different states look at decoupling in different ways. Massachusetts has recently, last year, chosen to move forward with decoupling, and we are going to be looking at our first utility rate cases in a long time. And the parameters of looking at those rate cases and how that decoupling is going to be done in Massachusetts, it is going to have all of the normal sort of processes to assure that extraordinary returns are not being generated by utilities. There are protections to make sure that rates are set appropriately. The stimulus bill recognizes all of the various ways that different states are dealing with this issue and allows for governors to simply assert that they are going to work towards building codes and towards disincentives, take away disincentives to maximize efficiency. And there's lots of ways that we can make that happen across the country.
Okay, thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Anderson has raised some criticisms of utility-based efficiency programs such as those used in Massachusetts, arguing that they're bad for industrial consumers. Could you respond briefly to those criticisms?
Yeah, we have had great success with our industrial energy efficiency programs, and a critical component is that we have the consistency and the targets that we set with our state, and then we execute accordingly within the various energy efficiency programs. So it has proven to be an effective tool for us to achieve our energy efficiency goals.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Campbell, you testified that an energy efficiency resource standard could create 260,000 new jobs. Can you talk about some of those job opportunities, how they would be created?
Yeah, we believe those job opportunities get created very quickly as energy efficiency projects and energy efficiency activity starts to increase. Some of the numbers that we see is just for every $1 million worth of projects, so we're probably looking at 5 to 7 direct jobs associated with that activity, and these are well-paid jobs. I mean, these are things like energy engineers, controls engineers, software engineers, project managers, construction crews, technicians, mechanics. These are good, solid domestic jobs that get created with energy efficiency.
Okay, Mr. King, what's the average rate of return on each dollar you invest in energy efficiency projects?
Our overall energy efficiency projects are not the utility investment. It's programs that are funded through our various state programs, and it is the most efficient, low-cost investment with other alternatives because we do view it as a resource. So as you deal with as energy efficiency, demand reductions, et cetera, those are the most effective investments from an overall return standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Anderson, under my EERS bill, electric and natural gas distribution companies are required to meet certain energy savings targets each year. Under that bill, utilities could satisfy those targets in part by buying from members of your organization the energy savings that your members achieve at their own facilities, for example, through combined heat and power, waste heat recovery, or other efficiency measures. In other words, this is a major opportunity for your members to profit through energy-saving projects. Isn't that something that you could actively support?
Mr. Chairman, your bill has quite a few very good things in it. I mean, I compliment you. It goes beyond utilities into building codes. It uses cost-effective throughout the bill. It talks about the need for measurement and verification. It talks about weather, taking into account weather in the economy and oversight and CHP, as you mentioned. But the way we look at the bill is it mandates energy efficiencies across the board. This is probably going to put a layer of cost across the board. Yes, there are some opportunities involved for some manufacturers who might be able to sell through a bilateral contract, which your bill does allow, but it also is going to affect other industrials in a different way. We think at least that industrials, through their competitive forces, have had to implement energy efficiency in a great amount, and we just think they ought to be exempt from the...
All right, let Mr. Wells respond to that. What do you think about that?
The question, please.
Just respond to Mr.
About the EERS.
Yeah, please.
We've reviewed the bill. We support the bill. When you look at the energy efficiency opportunities that we look at our own company, it's something that it's in line with the performance that I talked about, and it's in line with the opportunities that we see going forward.
Okay, and can you give you the final word, Mr. Giudice?
I think that the bill will actually unleash all kinds of opportunities in industrial facilities and commercial and governmental facilities, and I'm quite excited about it. I think many folks across the country will be able to
agree with that, Mr. King?
Yes, again, if you go back to some of my comments, our view is this is the foundation of a strong energy policy, and if we can build energy policy on the foundation of energy efficiency as one of the top resources, I think it's the right way to go.
Thank you, Mr. King. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schimper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me follow up on this. Would anyone who supports the EERS support it without decoupling? I'm sorry.
Phil Giudice, yes.
Giudice.
I would support ERS
Without decoupling?
without decoupling as a specified requirement. Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. King?
But to be clear, we would require different states to dealing with the utility by utility issues. To make
Mr.
that
King? Mr. King?
We are operating in states that are moving on a progressive path towards sound energy policy, and decoupling is an issue that they're willing to tackle. So we're going forward without it being a part of the.
So you don't need decoupling to support ERS.
Within the states we're operating in, the states are supportive of moving in the direction.
Anyone else want to add on to this debate? Let me follow up on this decoupling debate because this is pretty telling. Major users was thrown out, but this chart by the Department of Energy that my colleague Mr. Upton brought out talks about the additional cost to low users. Now, I represent parts of 30 counties in southern Illinois. We wish we had more manufacturing. We wish we had big users. We're producers of electricity through coal and through coal-fired operations. I've talked about that last hearing where 1,000 jobs in my district were lost through the Clean Air Act. I can point to the specific mine, and I showed pictures of that mine on the last thing. But this is talking about the effect to low users and residential small businesses of decoupling. So I would hope we didn't just disregard this. And I would want to ask Mr. Giudice and Mr. King. The Boston Globe, in an article January 18, 2008, and this is the second paragraph, Massachusetts manufacturers pay the highest electricity prices in the continental United States, and the gap between their cost and those competitors in other states is widening, according to an Energy Department. In 2006, the most recent annual data available, industrial users in Massachusetts paid more than double the average U.S. rate, compared to 60% more in 2005. Only Hawaii has higher industrial rates. And you're telling us that that's the standard that we should have? Higher industrial rates?
No.
The Massachusetts model?
I'm not saying that our rates are the model for the country. I would actually love to bring our rates down, and we're working hard to do that and are spending down on energy. And I suspect that the efficiency initiatives that we're taking are the ones that are going to drive that down most dramatically.
Art, let me add to this debate the international scope, because this is really an international debate, and we're competing internationally with countries around the world. If China and India do not fall into some climate change regime on cap and trade, can we ever compete with them in the manufacturing sector again?
In my view, the world needs to get
that's not the
involved in the carbon issue.
Well, the question is, if China and India does not, which I believe they will not, based upon discussions I've had with senior Chinese officials, if they do not, will we ever be competitive in major manufacturing in this country again?
We will have gigantic problems if China and India do not get involved in carbon issues.
Thank you. Let me follow up with, and I don't believe they will, obviously. Let me go, Mr. Campbell. This is a great in your testimony, and this is again on this decoupling, and you could have been stronger based upon your written testimony, because you say this: improving efficiency is good for everyone. Efficiency improvements not only reduce emissions but also save consumers and business money. Energy prices are escalating and would continue to rise with a price of carbon. This is what we say all the time. Energy prices are escalating and would continue to rise with the price on carbon. That's climate change, putting a price on carbon. Energy efficiency will reduce that impact of climate policies on energy and on consumers' energy bills. It will lower energy spending for American business, large and small, enabling them to better compete in the global economy. Smarter, more efficient buildings not only have lower utility bills, and that's what I want to highlight, but also improve health, safety, and comfort. If consumers do not see lower utility bills by efficiencies, will they move to an efficiency, new efficiency world?
I would say that for consumers and businesses to see or to take on those energy efficiency improvement measures, they have to see the incentive. There has to be an incentive for them.
And just for my Massachusetts friends at the panel, we debated decoupling here in the hearing. You are correct that the stimulus bill strongly implies for the governors to move their PUCs to a decoupling regime. And if you followed the debate here, there was no confusion that decoupling is a major issue. And as we see, it's going to cost individual consumers, and it's not going to provide the incentives for the individual consumers. And I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Inslee.
Thank you. Could the staff put up, we have a chart with California rates, or California usage. If you can put it up on the screen, please. Just want to make reference to that. A little difficult to see, but I think it does help visually to look at how stunningly different the per capita usage is in California, which is the lower blue line, and the average per capita usage of the American, the upper red line, and how they have diverged. And they have diverged in no small part because of some efforts in California to inspire efficiency. And I just want to note that the numbers are pretty stunning. The difference, as a result of that difference, together with the rate structures in California, that has saved Californians somewhere between $4.1 billion between 1997 and 2004. And basically, it's the difference between a flat per capita usage in California and about a 40% increase per capita in the United States. Now, as I understand what's happened in California, they've followed sort of a common sense provision. Their measures they've adopted basically say that if a consumer's energy needs can be met with a 3-cent per kilowatt investment in energy efficiency, essentially California has required utilities to go in that direction, where instead a 10-cent per kilowatt investment in a new power plant would be an alternative way to go about that. Now, our efforts in the stimulus bill would essentially, in one way or another, ask utilities to adopt that same type of strategy, which to me seems a relatively common sense provision. If you can achieve your consumers' goals, which is a warm house, with a less expensive investment in efficiency rather than a more expensive investment in power generation, then we want you to go in that direction. Now, I think the language of the stimulus bill, in fact, meets that sort of goal, and that's why the president of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners just last week basically expressed acceptance of the language that we put in the stimulus bill. So I just want to ask Mr. Giaducci, if I pronounced your name right, to comment. Is that a fair assessment of what we're doing in that bill?
Yes, that is a fair assessment, and I think it is a good case example of what's possible here for the whole country to move forward with.
Do any of the panel disagree with that assessment?
I'd like to add a couple of things to it. I happen to have been looking at the same chart that you put up there, and just add a couple of things to it. The vertical line right there, it's hard to see, it was 1976. My understanding is that California decoupled in 1982. They got rid of decoupling in 1996. They instituted recoupling again in 2004. They implemented inversed rates. In other words, the more you consume, the higher the cost per kilowatt hour. That, I think at least, went farther than anything else in bringing this about. And I conclude from this, if you have high rates, you're going to have lower consumption. Now, climate helps too. You know, when you're on the coast of California, you have a wonderful climate. It is truly God's country, and you don't need air conditioning a lot of the time or heating. So there's a lot of other factors here besides it. But what my main point is that business flight out of California has exceeded, I believe, just about any other state for a considerable length of time. And if we as society like that as a model, high prices, flights of businesses away, then I think we can go into this. I don't think this chart, though, tells us that decoupling is good or bad or whatever, because it just is far more complicated than that.
So do you have any assessment of, are you familiar with any studies that have tried to parse out the relative contributions to the California experience?
I don't know of any particular ones, no.
Very well. Let me ask in general, in regarding to Mr. Markey's bill, do any of you have any suggestions on changes to the bill other than what you've ever articulated? I just want to give you an opportunity if you have any suggestions for us in that regard. Mr. Markey, of course, thinks that this is perfect Mona Lisa, which we normally would start with a presumption in that regard, but I just wanted to give anybody an opportunity.
I would look at even more aggressive targets in the EERS, both on the gas side and on the electric side. I think those are understandable as to why those are the sets that we're starting with, but I think as we think about the climate challenges that we're facing and the economic opportunities that we will unleash, that we could ramp those targets up more significantly and quicker.
Anyone else?
We would like very much to see the bill have the ability for industrials to opt into it. Clearly there are cases where there could be real advantages if an industrial was involved and sell some energy efficiency savings. But we also think that that one size does not fit all, and we think it would be very difficult, so we'd prefer to see them excluded otherwise.
Thank you.
Great. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got a hearing going on downstairs, too, so I've been running back and forth. I want to ask Mr. Inslee a question, although he's not on the panel. If Mr. Inslee, what's the retail cost of your constituents for electricity in Washington?
Well, that violates the rule against embarrassing any of your colleagues, so I'll decline to answer, both because it violates that rule and secondly, I don't know.
Oh, well, I'm not trying to embarrass you. I think it's around 7 cents a kilowatt hour.
I honestly do not know the answer to that question.
Okay, it's very low. You've got some of the lowest utility.
That is correct. That is correct.
What's the average retail rate in California, Mr. Anderson or Mr. Reichel? They have some of the highest rates.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barton, I don't know the numbers. I know that it is very, very substantially.
Well, I know in San Francisco their highest rate is 37 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, spare me the California model. You know, brownouts, haven't built any new power plants in probably decades. This decoupling, which I'm going to ask Mr. Anderson about. I want the Jay Inslee Washington State model, Bonneville Power Administration generating clean hydropower because God blessed his region of the country with great hydro resources, and the federal government during the New Deal built some of the most efficient hydroelectric power dams in the world, so his constituents get power at probably the lowest rate in the country. That's a plus for them. It's not a negative. I'm not trying to embarrass Mr. Inslee at all because that's just the way it is. But this, this hearing on energy efficiency is a good hearing. I'm for what Mr. Markey's trying to do, but don't gag me by saying that we need to emulate the great state of California, who is almost single-handedly doing everything they can to destroy their economy. On almost a daily basis, and which has the largest state budget deficit in the history of the nation, $42 billion this year alone. To put that in perspective, the entire budget of the state of Texas on an annual basis, which is the second most populous state, is I think $75 billion. So anyway, Mr. Anderson, what's your opinion of decoupling? I asked Mr. Anderson, but I'll let Mr. Reichel answer it if he wants to.
I'll yield to Mr. Anderson.
Oh.
As I said very briefly in my oral remarks, and I have much more detail.
I've got the name tags wrong. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
We are very much opposed to revenue decoupling for a variety of reasons. First of all, we agree that there needs to be incentives for cost-effective energy efficiency. There's no doubt about that. But trying to pay extra amounts to utilities to have them implement it just doesn't make sense. The dollar that you give to a utility for energy efficiency, and remember, utilities don't spend their money; they spend customers' money. So you give $1 to a utility to implement energy efficiency, they take a sizable portion of that in overhead and whatever else, and then they give what's left back to some customers. This is an income redistribution. It probably doesn't really reduce the disincentive of a utility anyway. 80–90% of the utilities' revenues are still going to come from generation, no matter what you do. So we have a whole variety of reasons why we are strongly opposed to revenue decoupling. I would also like to say that I was surprised to hear someone say that NARUC, the National Association of Utility Regulatory Commissioners, supported the provision in the stimulus bill. I was working very closely with NARUC throughout that debate, and I thought that they were opposed. I cannot speak for them, but I think we ought to find out where they stood on the final.
Is there a better way to incent a utility to do these energy efficiency programs than decoupling?
I think a far better way, if you're going to have a utility involved at all, I think a far better way is to have the utility be basically a tax collector. They collect money from customers, however you specify that they're going to do it, and they turn the money over to a third party whose sole objective is to implement energy efficiency. Their business model is to implement energy efficiency. I believe Vermont has one, North Carolina has one, New York has one. There's a variety of examples, and we think at least that they work a whole lot better than trying to have an internal conflict within a utility. One side wants to sell more power, another side wants to sell less power, and it's an internal conflict inside. Have a business model of a utility to produce and sell and distribute energy efficiently, and have a third party whose sole business is to implement energy efficiency.
My time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes.
Mr. Chair, may I just, Mr.
Washington.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson brought up an issue about the chair of the National Association for Regulatory Utility Commissioners, and I had made reference to essentially that they had said that they're comfortable with the final product. With your permission, I'll put his statement in the record, and I think it will clarify that. They basically had concerns about the original product. He expressed comfort with the final product.
Thank you. And I guess
if I may, I'm going to ask the gentleman from Texas if he would mind having this clarification be part of a 1-minute extension that was granted to the gentleman from Texas. Thank you. Gentleman, Mr. Anderson, if you want to respond.
Yes, I was at the meetings where they did this, and I didn't understand the final, so I may be incorrect with it, but I know that there was tremendous concern that a public utility commission is supposed to be an independent body. And the way I read the language, the way they were reading the language, was the governor is supposed to be, in essence, trying to tell the independent commission what to do, and they thought this caused tremendous amounts of internal conflict, maybe ex parte kinds of concerns and that sort of thing. But if I am incorrect, I need to stand corrected. I apologize if I am.
Well, we'll just put this in the record and let people draw their own conclusions. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, I am from Vermont. We do have decoupling, and we do have a separate energy efficiency utility, and they both seem to be successful. The decoupling was a process that was widely debated with our utilities and worked out. And I want to get back to what we can do and not get just bogged down in whether this question of decoupling should get in the way of an aggressive frontal assault on efficiency. Mr. Giudice, as a state official, you obviously have some sense of the importance of state autonomy, and some are arguing that setting a federal floor for building energy efficiency imposes a one-size-fits-all approach that interferes with autonomy at the state level. Yet you are arguing very aggressively for strong federal building standards, and I want you to elaborate on that.
Thank you. Yes. It is clear that the market alone is not working on our efficiency around the country. There are market failures, there are market barriers, and so we need to stimulate the right decisions. But it isn't one size fits all. And what does work in the Southeast in terms of windows, as Mr. Upton was speaking of earlier, is different than what works in the Northeast. But that doesn't mean that all of us don't have an opportunity to go much, much more significantly towards energy efficiency. And I do think that this kind of approach as laid out in the proposed act will enable us to do that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Campbell, it's tremendous to hear about the success that you've had at Johnson Controls. And one of the big dilemmas that we face, and it's being argued here, I think largely around this question of decoupling, is what's the dislocation that occurs when you go from one energy policy to a new one. And you have been successful, as I understand it, in achieving efficiency and also creating jobs. And I want you to elaborate on that in your point of view about how aggressive we should be using efficiency as a tool to create jobs.
I mean, our view is that energy efficiency is the #1 opportunity for managing emissions, for managing some of the capacity issues that we have on the generation side. And clearly, energy efficiency creates significant jobs. There's a significant industry behind that. But there are a mismatch of incentives that are out there today. So as we look at this, we really do see significant value coming from a whole series of complementary measures that need to be introduced, both around building codes, equipment standards, and also the energy efficiency resource standards that have been introduced. But in addition to that, we believe that there does need to be the very clear alignment of incentives for people that are making energy efficiency improvements on their buildings.
All right. And what would you say would be the, say, 2 or 3 incentive alignments that would be the most helpful?
Well, the first one has to be to save money. I mean, that's ultimately what you want to see with any efficiency improvement measures, that you have to have a return from undertaking that activity. And depending on the scale of the return, which can be complemented with specific incentives, depends how deep you can go within an energy efficiency project. So you can see energy efficiency projects without incentives, especially in the private sector. They go very shallow, maybe look at lighting, maybe look at recommissioning, constant commissioning of a building. But to do the deep energy efficiency improvement measures that go 30, 40% energy efficiency improvement in a building, people either have to have a very long-term perspective on that building, or there have to be incentives attached to taking those measures.
Okay, thank you. You know, in Vermont, we spend about $1 billion a year, which for our small state is a lot of money, on energy that is money that goes straight out of the state. A lot of interest in doing combined heat and power or other means of local generation of electricity in order to keep that energy dollar recirculating as much as possible in Vermont. Mr. Wells, what specific things could we do, as you see it, to encourage local generation of power, to keep those dollars at home?
When you talk specifically to combined heat and power or cogeneration, it's finding a means to utilize the waste heat that comes off power generation. Today's power generation, pulverized coal, efficiencies are in the high 30s. In some of the cogeneration units that we run, they're in the high 70s, if not approaching 80. Because of our ability to capture that heat, we have a ready heat sink right there to use it. So distributed heating, finding a way to take the heat off of a power plant and using it to heat homes in a neighborhood or in some sort of way, or finding an industry that needs that heat and coupling that up to with the power plant. When electricity is sold in the grid, the heat is used. Problem is, heat can't be transported like electricity can. So it has to be something local, has to be something distributed right nearby.
And then how do you deal with the impact that it has on the local utilities that would potentially lose customer base or lose revenues? And anybody on the panel can answer that.
Just to put a couple of things in perspective, first of all, when you look at the total energy bill, both the transmission and distribution cost and other key important programs are basically at inflation or below. The bigger problem is the energy costs, and what we need to do is focus on how can we most efficiently reduce consumption and help reduce those overall energy costs. That's the fundamental driver on why bills are where they are.
Thank you. I think my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Walden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Campbell, as you know, in my opening remarks, I cited the comments in your testimony, and I apologize for having to leave to go to the Communications Subcommittee, so you may have addressed this. But it appears to me that you're arguing against decoupling in those comments, because you're saying that energy prices are escalating and would continue to rise with price on carbon. Energy efficiency will reduce the impact of climate policies on consumers' energy bills. will lower energy spending for American business. You talk about doing all these controls to lower energy bills on consumers as a good thing, as an incentive, I would assume, to do energy conservation. I mean, I think the average person in my district says, gee, I want to cut my costs. My budget's constrained right now. I'm afraid of losing my job. They're not going to be really excited if the state moves forward on decoupling. It says, yeah, you do all that stuff, but oh, by the way, you're going to get to pay the same amount. Isn't that what really happens under decoupling?
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm not arguing against decoupling, but I'm arguing for energy efficiency and ensuring that there's aligned incentives associated with those energy efficiency measures to drive energy efficiency, so we bring true economics to the consumer or the business so they can make smart decisions.
All right, Mr. Anderson, let me go to you, because it seems to me from your testimony you would be arguing against decoupling. Yes. And that I don't know what it seems to me it's a really perverse incentive to tell businesses, and I was a small business owner for 21 years, that you use less, pay the same.
Or
tell me
more.
how that's going to help our economy. Tell me the stimulative effect on a small business by having them pay the same utility rates because they conserve their energy consumption.
Well, as I've said earlier today, also, I agree with you completely, and it is a disincentive. We also look at it for why are the utilities guaranteed anything? I mean, my members right now would love to be decoupled from their customers. I assure you, my auto companies today would love to be making the same amount of money that they used to make.
I was in the radio business for 21 years, small market radio stations, and I always thought it would be great for every time we didn't sell an ad and had time to run it, that, maybe we should have gotten paid. That would be the ultimate form of decoupling. My salespeople would have loved that too, I suppose. But it's not the way it works.
Correct.
It's not the way it works. Mr. King, I noticed in your testimony that you congratulated the Congress for passing the stimulus with $3.1 billion in state matching grants for energy efficiency and assistance for low-income consumers to weatherize their homes. Won't low-income consumers be hurt as well if they do all this weatherization and the utility company comes back and gets to charge them the same amount?
The intent behind the low-income consumer program will be to ensure that we are doing what we can to reduce their overall energy bill. And all that goes into how overall rates are designed.
And who pays for that subsidy to the low-income energy consumers who have reduced their consumption because they've taken advantage of weatherization, which I'm a big advocate of? Who subsidizes them? Where's that money come from?
All of those type of decisions are rolled into the overall rate design, and our customers as a whole, as a community, support those kind of programs.
Now, community is a wonderful term to use, but at the end of the day, it's everybody paying their power bill, right?
That's absolutely.
And do higher power rates affect the economy?
No, they don't. That's a cost of living and doing business.
Have you ever been in small business?
No, I have not.
I have. And I got to tell you, in the radio business, I did everything I could, as I could afford to replace old tube-type transmitters with solid-state ones so I could cut my energy bill, be more efficient. That savings amounted to something in my bottom line.
I can understand that. And we'd spend a tremendous amount of time with our customers trying to find ways to help them reduce
But how can you say that the higher energy costs don't affect the economy? I'm struggling here.
I don't think I said that. I think I said, yes, I understand how it impacts the economy, and it's part of living within a certain area and trying to help manage overall energy bills on a day-in, day-out basis.
But don't you think the best incentive is the good old marketplace that says, if I can cut the use of my power, I can save myself a little money and put it towards something else?
That's exactly what energy efficiency and demand reduction is about.
It is, except when you add decoupling to it that says the utility gets to charge me the same amount, regardless how much I save.
Decoupling doesn't necessarily equate to that sentence. It's really
what does it equate to then?
The overall issue that we're trying to deal with from decoupling is making sure that we understand the cost to deliver the energy and that we have the ability to recover those costs. That's it.
Which is why the utilities love decoupling.
The overall issue with why we support decoupling is making sure that, again, as you've heard from the panel today, is that the incentives are aligned, and we're making sure that we're we are doing what we can to support the policy to reduce energy demand.
Well, I just wish we'd been able to have a single hearing on this issue as it was related to the language in the bill that everybody voted on and very few got a chance to read in advance. I'm trying to figure out now what this language that is now law means in terms of assuring that the governors get assurance from their PUCs to implement it. I know my time's expired. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I should start off with my own observation of Texas government and Texas budgets as compared to California. I'm not here to defend California, but by the same token, I know how state governments can save a lot of money. Texas has been able to do it by simply not investing in infrastructure or maintaining what they have and making no real investment in health care or education. You can save a lot of money that way. There's a greater price down the road, and I believe that my analysis would be supported by any study of what Texas has done in the past few years. As we go through this debate today, you would think that we've made some real progress. Because you think in terms of the first year of the Bush administration in 2001, and I know it's getting into the partisan, but let's just figure that we've made some progress. Because in 2001, it was Vice President Cheney who commented on efficiency and conservation, that conservation may be a sign of personal virtue, but it is not a sufficient basis for sound, comprehensive energy policy. I think we all acknowledge here today, even my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, that conservation and efficiency does in fact have a place in the overall energy policy of this country. At least that's what I'm hearing. I've heard it referred to as not necessarily the fifth fuel, but the first fuel. I've heard it as being one of the legs to a three-legged stool and so on. But what I'm really hearing here is that we acknowledge it's out there, its value, but it can't be done. Whether we say it's about decoupling, or are we talking about exemption for the industrial sector and so on. So on one hand, I think we recognize certain things like, well, we recognize that global warming is real. But I'm not real sure that we can do anything about it. But at least we have the acknowledgement. So I feel hopeful that we have finally acknowledged a fundamental fact and we move forward. The question to the panel, and I'm going to ask Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, during your testimony, I wasn't real sure if I heard you correctly about an industrial sector exemption. Is that what you stated?
In Mr. Markey's bill, that's what we were suggesting, yes.
All right. And do you wish to elaborate at all? Because I'm going to ask the other witnesses to comment on that proposal and what they believe might be the impact.
Our companies operate in worldwide competitive markets, and the tremendous competition requires them, we believe, to implement cost-effective energy efficiency already. And we're concerned that if another layer gets put on top of that, it adds another layer of cost, while doing more on the energy efficiency is quite difficult. So we are asking that industrials have the option of either opting in if they want to be, but otherwise being left out of the federal mandates.
Well, I think our industrial base does operate at a terrible disadvantage with other countries. India and China, of course, come to mind. The problem is we're not India and China. And the truth is much of our progress and stuff was based on some pretty bad experiences. And it doesn't mean that we continue or revert back to practices that should have been unacceptable in any circumstances. I don't want to go too far back, but let's just go back to child labor and working conditions and such. That'll give us a tremendous advantage. Maybe we'll be able to compete with practices in other countries, but I don't think we do that. When it comes to global warming and practices, I think there is a certain responsibility, not to sink our economy, but to do the responsible thing. I'm not sure if you say it's a moral imperative and all that. Look, this is the real world, and my constituents want jobs and a quality of life also. So it does not fall on deaf ears, but I'm not sure if you're advancing an argument that simply says, we just can't do it under the present economic circumstances, and we never will be able to do it. But let's just talk about the exemption. Is that a viable choice? Is that something Mr. Markey should be considering? And I will ask the other witnesses to make their remarks and to address that particular statement by Mr. Anderson.
Let me add to that. I think when you look at competitive, that's a very good point. And in my case, the competition is not labor costs, it's energy costs. And so we're competing with places like the Middle East, where they can get natural gas out of the wellhead at $1 per MMBTU. And as recently as last summer, we were paying $14 for that same. And for that reason, we have done the sort of efficiency improvements that I talked about. The 1,600 trillion BTUs of energy that Dow Chemical has saved since 1994. And for that reason, the opt-out may make some sense because we've done a lot of the things that are out there. And for us to go to the next step gets us out of what would be defined as cost-effective and into much more costly. However, having said that, having looked at the bill and looked at the numbers, at least for our particular company, we feel that the bill as introduced is something we can live with.
Yeah, let me just add to that. With the targets within the bill, I would concur. Personally, on behalf of our company, I believe we need to get serious about energy efficiency, and having exemptions is not getting serious about energy efficiency. I think the numbers are very attainable from all businesses, and I think that that it really is a significant opportunity to drive competitiveness of our industrial base to get more competitive in relation to energy efficiency and energy consumed.
Yes, sir. I strongly support no opt-out for anyone, that we're all in this together and there's opportunities for all of us to do so much more. In Texas, the PUC there and the State Energy Office has recently looked at the efficiency potential in Texas and determined that there's upwards of 20+% of reduction of energy consumption possible, and the economy would grow without any shrinkage. It would grow jobs in Texas by reducing energy consumption on upwards of 20%.
Our industrial base is very interested in finding every way they can to reduce their energy consumption. We spend a great deal of time with them on it. We've had great success in reducing their overall energy consumption. And if we set goals and objectives in this bill, we need to find every way we can do it to achieve those goals and objectives. So I would highly recommend we stay with as large of a market impact that we can to ensure that we're achieving the efficiency goals.
And is it Mr. Reichel, is that correct, the pronunciation?
Yes, sir. As my expertise here today is pretty much with energy. Once it's inside the building, I would again support anything that we can do from the energy efficiency side on the outside of the building.
Thank you very much. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. King, in your testimony that you had submitted, I think is on the first page, you had talked about the various strategies that you embrace, and I think your comment was, we need it all. And I agree with that. I know a lot of us last year in the big energy debate we were having in Congress proposed an all of the above strategy, which encompasses efficiency, conservation, but also production of natural resources as well as renewables. One of the things, and we had this debate on the stimulus bill, that we consider a renewable option is nuclear power. And there was an attempt to include nuclear power, which has no carbon emissions, in that renewable definition. Unfortunately, that was an unsuccessful attempt. Do you support including nuclear power in that we need it all strategy that you envision in your testimony?
I think it's important that we look at all the alternatives.
And consider that as one of the alternatives.
It's an alternative, so it's important that we look at all the alternatives and make sure that we understand and have a comprehensive view of where we can take our national energy policy.
Yeah, and clearly many other countries are already pursuing that in a very aggressive way. Our country seems to be lagging behind. Hopefully that changes as the technologies advance, but it's clearly working well for many who are using it, so appreciate that. Mr. Wells, in some of your testimonies, you talk about natural gas prices and the effects, and obviously, we've got some large facilities with your company and others in South Louisiana, and as gas prices increased, it had a stifling effect on growth in the industry. As companies are trying to be more efficient, and of course the biggest incentive is the profit incentive, and there is a profit incentive to be more efficient. But as you squeeze efficiencies out, and then you get to a point where decoupling and other things would potentially increase rates for those who have done all they can, what, in terms of job losses, every time you have a 1% increase in natural gas prices, for example, what does that mean in terms of your ability to continue keeping the people employed that you have employed, looking at moving more operations overseas? How many jobs are lost for every 1% increase in natural gas prices?
I don't have the number of the 1% or the one, but in the chemical industry, in the last 8 years, we've lost over 100,000 jobs in this country, in large part due to what's happened to natural gas pricing, where we were in an area where we paid a pretty constant price in this country, and we built a rather large chemical infrastructure around that and became an export base for much of the world. When natural gas did what it did back in the late 90s into the early part of this decade, then we started looking for other cheaper sources and found them. In my own company, we're looking at building plants in Saudi Arabia, places like Libya, Egypt, because we can get that very cheap feedstock. And it's important to know for the chemical industry, natural gas is not just a source of energy. We don't just burn it in a turbine or just combust it to make steam. We also use it to make our feedstocks. And I talked about our company alone. The bill last year was over $27 billion for our energy costs. And when those costs, not only do they rise because of increasing demand and supply that is starting to fall off. We've seen some new discoveries that's helped, but we think that's just at best going to delay the inevitable. But we also, when we think about the climate change and what can happen with climate change and climate legislation, what we support, the easy answer is to go to natural gas for power generation and to combust natural gas over coal and lead to this dash to gas, which can even further exacerbate the situation.
Yeah, and I just hope as we go forward, a lot of us have concerns about exporting jobs overseas and job losses, and you talk about 100,000 jobs lost in a way because of a failed energy policy. I just hope we're very cautious in how we proceed, that some of the things we do where we all agree that efficiency is important, where we don't have penalties on the other side that actually cost us more jobs. And your industry is a good example of how there is a point of if you exceed that level, your ability to continue employing the people you have is going to diminish. And so hopefully we keep all of that in mind as we entertain legislation to address the concerns that I think a lot of us have. But how we get there, we've got to be cautious that we don't have those consequences, which I don't think would be unintended, because we're well aware that, as you point out, that those have direct impacts on businesses' ability to continue operating profitably here or looking at other options in other countries, which have definitely been taken by companies over years and hopefully won't in the future, and hopefully we don't do anything in this Congress that encourages people to move those jobs overseas. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's interesting, I follow our new colleague from Louisiana because I have a district in Houston that I have the petrochemical complexes there, and when you talk about losing jobs because of high price of natural gas, we've seen that in our district, and particularly in the recent with our own economy with what's happening, because a lot of the things that our chemical industry does actually goes into home buildings for weatherization and things like that. That's why this last bill was a success, I think, to try and do some of the things that we want to do. I want to follow up the line of questioning, Mr. Wells. I know Dow Chemical is a member of the U.S. Climate Action Partnership, and like I said, you have your biggest plant in my area, at least in Freeport. It's not my district, but I have Channelview, Houston, and Pasadena, so I have a number of your facilities. In your testimony, you mentioned that one of the likeliest ways to meet short-term carbon emission reduction targets called for in the climate change is the fuel switching from coal to natural gas. And again, with my accent, you would think I would love natural gas being, and that's not a problem. It's just that in the chemical industry, it's not only a fuel, but it's a feedstock. Right. And that's what's caused us to lose those jobs. And I can tell you 3 years ago, Shell Chemical moved jobs from Deer Park, Texas, in my district to the Netherlands for 2 reasons. The price of natural gas from the North Sea was cheaper, but also the price of health care for the Netherlands was cheaper per employee at their plant in Deer Park. So our committee has jurisdiction over both of those, and hopefully we'll make it a little more competitive. But the so-called dash to gas could be ruinous for those industries that are dependent on it, like the chemical industry. So I have significant concerns about any impact that the climate change would have on affordable and reliable supplies of clean natural gas. Now, I have to admit, I was, even in Washington, we see Boone Pickens ads, and if we all did what Boone Pickens wanted us to do, not only with wind and solar, but natural gas, we might not be having this concern. But since I represent a great deal of the manufacturing facilities, and Mr. Wells, do you believe that enacting energy efficiency measures would be enough to offset the job losses in particularly your manufacturing sector due to the increased demand for natural gas from the fuel switching?
No, they would not be enough. They're an important first step. They're an important easy step. They're an important economical step. But we have to go farther. We have to look at increased supply. What can we do to get more supply in the situation? We have to manage both sides of the supply-demand equation. We have to manage demand by the efficiency measures and other complementary measures we talked about today. But we also have to manage the demand side and make sure as a country we can get at the source of natural gas and oil that we have available. We're the only country in the world that isn't allowed to look for our own resources right off our shores.
Well, in this Congress, or at least the last Congress, made some exceptions, and we took off the moratorium on outer continental shelf drilling. Now, I know there may be some adjustments to that, and we don't want to drill in national parks and sanctuaries and things like that, but there are areas that we can get natural gas, because natural gas is site-based. You know, I know Dow put in an LNG facility in Freeport, but that's not the way to solve the problem. We really need to have it much closer as you can pipeline it, and because the cost gets so extravagant.
Now, we didn't put it in. It's another company put it next to ours, and we are a user of that
You're
facility.
A user of
so
it.
just to clear out.
I say that you're the biggest customer.
Yeah,
you probably wouldn't be there without Dow and Freeport. So, and I know, and I'm a big, in fact, in the 05 energy bill, Congressman Terry and I both championed that, where we would import natural gas when possible, but that's not our solution either. So what design elements for a cap and trade program, whether it's reduction of targets and timetables or cost containment mechanisms or complementary policies, would be most effective and lessen the impact of fuel switching? Does Dow or?
Absolutely. To speak to, as a member of US CAP recently came out with their blueprint for legislative action. And in there it talks about certainly the complementary measures for coal, complementary measures for transportation, things we would like to see, certainly carbon capture and storage. The ability to continue to use coal in a responsible way will go a long way to keeping the dash for gas. What will happen if we don't do something like that? Natural gas becomes the bridge. As we invent the carbon-free energy infrastructure, that's going to take time. And to bridge that time, the easy choice is to go to natural gas. Natural gas creates half the amount of CO2 as coal does in a power generation situation. And as our industry cannot afford for that to happen because of what I've talked about.
And also when you happen in carbon capture and sequestration, that will help, in particularly with coal. And I know your response to the earlier question about nuclear power, again, that's 15 years away, if we're lucky, maybe 12.
We certainly think nuclear is part of it, both the traditional light water reactors and then some of the newer technologies around next generation, the high temperature gas reactor. We see lots of potential, although that technology's got a long way to go, lots of potential for that also to come to bear.
Okay. Last year, the Natural Gas Council produced a model that predicted demand for natural gas would increase by as much as 10 trillion cubic feet per year under climate change legislation. First question is, even with measures to increase of energy efficiency, do you believe it's still necessary to increase environmentally responsible reduction of natural gas, domestic natural gas supplies in order to meet short-term carbon reduction targets called for in a climate change legislation and to keep those good-paying manufacturing jobs in the U.S.?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Could congressional efforts to hinder the domestic production of clean natural gas inhibit the U.S. from achieving those short-term carbon reduction targets while protecting our manufacturing base?
Yes.
So it's compatible as a member of both U.S. CAP to be a supporter of efforts to reduce carbon emissions as well as to increase domestic supplies of clean natural gas?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, you mentioned the importance of utilizing combined heat and power technologies in petroleum and chemical industries and expressed disappointment with FERC's recent rulemaking regarding incentives for CHP as called for under the Energy Act of 2005. Can you further elaborate on why you believe that rulemaking would discontinue CHP incentives in certain FERC-approved regional transmission organizations?
The FERC order, the rule that came out, basically said that the PURPA incentives granted in 1978 for combined heat and power for cogeneration would go away in those markets that FERC has approved as being a RTO or an ISO. That's an independent system operator or a regional transmission system. So in those areas, which covers a significant portion of the country, the incentives that have been there since 1978 are going away. A utility can simply file with FERC and ask that they go away, and they're beginning to do that. We did not think that that was the intent of the act in 2005. In fact, we worked with Representatives Barton and Boucher and others when that language went through. And so what we're asking is that you all take another look at that and see if that really was the intent. We at least believe, as manufacturers that do a lot of cogeneration, a lot of combined heat and power, that it's a big detriment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know my time's expired, but I appreciate that, and we'll see what we can do, because I know that wasn't the intent in 2005 when we were doing the
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you. Mr. Green's questioning dovetails well with the direction I want to go in. In my opening remarks, I cited the December Oak Ridge National Laboratory report stating that manufacturing facilities and commercial buildings are sources of waste energy that can be captured and converted into useful electricity and steam production. And further, it said that waste energy recovery is one of the most promising options in the U.S. energy efficiency portfolio, and that if the U.S. adopted a high deployment strategy, combined heat and power development could generate $234 billion in new investment and create nearly 1 million new high-skilled technical jobs throughout the country. The report goes on to say that the U.S. could avoid 60% of potential growth in greenhouse gas emissions between now and the year 2030 if we increase the amount of electricity produced from distributed energy sources from 9% today to 20% by the year 2030. And we've had some questioning about this, but I'd like to look, with this potential out there, sort of have a little bit more of a discussion about the various incentives and barriers, the regulatory environment, as we've just talked about, the technological hurdles, and cost. And I guess I want to start in with cost, because there was some testimony suggesting that this isn't cost effective, that it's cost prohibitive. I've certainly heard from many industrial waste experts who have waste energy experts who say that much of the technology is readily available without further R&D. Required heat exchangers, turbines, piping are all off the shelf, not requiring additional R&D. And that there's other things that create hesitation in making these investments in the industrial sector. So I guess to Mr. Wells and Mr. Anderson, if you might comment first on the cost barriers and additional incentives that we could be looking at.
I can only speak for the industrial sector and for our own, and we don't see any cost barriers. For the Dow Chemical Company, the vast majority of the power that we use is self-generated, well over 70%, and of that power, well over 90% comes from cogeneration. So in our application, it makes a lot of sense, an awful lot of sense for us, and we make maximum use of it.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, question about cost?
First, I'm not familiar with the studies. I apologize for that. But one of the big barriers to cogeneration is the ability to get backup maintenance and standby power. If your generator does go down, you've got to be able to buy it, and you can buy it in a non-discriminatory way. And we're concerned that when the incentives of PURPA were taken away, that it's taking those things away, and that's why we're asking that you look at those things again. I agree that there's a tremendous potential for combined heat and power. I'm not as familiar with distributed generation. That is much smaller and applies to commercial and, say, residential entities, but I understand that there's a potential there also.
Well, let me follow up on that answer. In designing the Energy Independence and Security Act, I know that I worked with energy efficiency experts in my own district to craft the Waste Energy Incentive Grant Program, really to incentivize owners and operators of industrial facilities to successfully produce electricity from the recovered waste energy. Specifically, it provides a financial incentive of $10 per megawatt hour, and it's authorized at the $200 million level, although not yet appropriated. Is this, in your mind, sufficient financial incentive for manufacturers to invest in capturing waste energy and converting it to useful energy?
We're strong supporters of the program. I can't say whether that's sufficient or not, but I can say that it is definitely a significant step in the right direction, and I hope the money does get appropriated. As you said, it hasn't been appropriated yet. But we've been working with the Department of Energy as they're trying to implement this, and we think it's a great idea.
And I recognize there is controversy over whether manufacturers should be able to convert waste heat to energy and then sell any excess back onto the grid. How essential is the ability to sell excess energy to the success of harnessing waste energy, industrial waste energy? Mr. Wells and Mr.
I think it varies significantly by application, by industry, by even down to the individual plant. Mr. Wells just mentioned that they consume most of the power that they consume, and that certainly is a model that many others use, but others have the opportunity to produce more power than they can consume, and you've got to be able to sell it then at a price that makes sense. Once again, it gets into the review of it, but that is an important area for many applications.
Mr. Wells?
Yeah, when you look at how we use cogeneration, that's a very important thing for us because we balance on steam. We make all the steam we need, and then whatever power that comes along through the cogeneration process, if it's more than we need at a location, then being able to sell it on the grid is very helpful to us. If we don't make enough, then being able to buy off the grid is very helpful to us.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Matheson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One observation before I ask questions. As I listened to the discussion on decoupling that was taking place, whether people think they're for it or against it, I detected a lack of understanding about it during this discussion. I heard people comparing decoupling issues relative to regulated utilities with how it would apply to private sector competitive businesses. I sensed the discussion, quite frankly, diverted into a lot of extraneous issues that weren't relevant. And so it may be helpful for members of this committee to get a primer on decoupling and what it means and what it doesn't mean, because as I said, as I listened to that discussion, I think there was a lot of confusion and a lot of apples and oranges comparison that were not necessarily appropriate or productive to the conversation.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
I want to address the issue briefly of appliance standards. In the act that was developed between the House and the Senate, the House version in 2007 had some provisions that allowed multiple efficiency standards for a single appliance. During the conference negotiations with the Senate, some of those provisions were dropped. Anyone on the panel, I'd like to ask what room you think there are for further improvement in energy efficient appliances regulations in that regard.
Gigantic room for improvement. We're consuming electricity in devices that are not producing any useful product for us. Our set-top boxes, TVs that are on standby, plug power, vampire power in our homes is consuming 10 or 15% of the electricity that a residence is consuming for no useful output. And there is technologies off the shelf that once we put them in place can go back down to 1-watt standbys on all of those devices and still be able to come alive at 4 in the morning when you want to record some show if need be. So we just haven't spent enough attention on these matters across the board. As we look at in Massachusetts, and we've seen similar studies across the country, just taking energy efficient devices off the shelves that exist today, Energy Star and better, and putting them in across the nation would save on the order of 20 or 25% in our residential electricity consumption. So tremendous opportunities. We haven't unleashed all the potential from design and marketplace to really drive that. And I would call for very high standards.
Agree with all of that. The other element that I would add is we need to also begin to think about the future. And as we deal with intelligence on the grid, smart meters, et cetera, if we could start developing the standards for appliances where we could automate demand reduction, energy efficiency, et cetera, it'll have a significant impact when you have a broad-scale deployment of energy efficiency in those appliances.
I think being forward-looking makes some sense. Currently, the law does not allow for use of multiple standards for appliances, like if you have a dual electric gas furnace. Are those changes Congress ought to be looking at to try to create some of those multiple standards?
Yes, and I think we have to really look at all of the standard setting very differently than we have to date. SEER rating standards on air conditioners are seasonal electricity consumption, not peak electricity consumption. Now, some of the air conditioners actually have a small compressor that actually, when it gets really hot, it's very inefficiently producing that cooling to kind of boost it. Looks like a good SEER rating, but it actually hits us the hardest on those peak days when we're trying to meet the electric load. So looking at our standard setting and doing it on a very accelerated time path, I think is very appropriate for national attention.
This committee learned in 2007 that the DOE process for appliance standards takes a long time. And other countries such as Japan use a top runner program where the standard is updated every 3 years based on the top technology at the time. That technology becomes a standard for the next 3-year period. My question is this type of model realistic for the United States, and how do we address concerns that manufacturers may express about making that a challenging time frame for them to adopt the new standards? Does anyone have thoughts on that?
I'm a little bit familiar with the program in Japan, and I think it's a very interesting model, and I think it actually stimulates innovation and creativity in their design, and I think it would do the same here. I think that we've been so comfortable in sort of our absence of attention on this, and our manufacturing folks have not spent sufficient attention to these matters, that any kind of a change to a new regime is really hard, and so it's the initial reaction is to resist it. But I think that working collaboratively under very clear deadlines and very clear outcomes that we would want, we could get to very similar models, and it would be beneficial for all of us.
Okay. And, just to quickly add to that, the opportunity that the bill provides us is a federal standard. So once we have absolutely set that target, then you're going to get a lot of expertise to jump in and help move, to help not only from a state standpoint, but for overall federal policy. So that's a big opportunity you have as you debate the bill and support it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I would just, if I may, just add a comment. I think that aggressive standards drive innovation. They also ultimately help with manufacturing scale, which gives us more cost-effective appliances that will be going into the market.
Okay. Thank you. I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give each one of you 1 minute to tell us what you want us to remember from your testimony. What's your highlight? What's your takeaway message? What is it that you want us to be factoring into the development of energy and climate change legislation this year in terms of efficiency? We'll begin with you, Mr. Reichel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want you to remember me for my expertise on decoupling.
It's the joke of the day, though, and well done.
Our technology that we have brought before the panel today and the committee works with every control system and every HVAC system in the country. I would encourage this committee to set a performance efficiency standard. For every building has different controls and different HVAC systems, but they all have an operating strategy. Building performance software can help these buildings calibrate the buildings to actually achieve that energy efficiency goal. This is probably one of the last bastions of energy efficiency available in operation and maintenance. The federal buildings, I would encourage it strongly. We are working with the GSA, but I'd encourage them because private practice will follow what the federal buildings do. And I would also look at setting this for schools. There's $13 to $15 billion of savings out there if we did this across the country. And I think it's very important, and I commend you for your work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reichel, very much. Mr. Anderson.
I just hope that you will look very carefully at what the impacts of whatever you do will be on the manufacturing community. Nearly every one of these proposals will raise rates that we see. Some will bring about lowering consumption, and if the two offset, then that's great. But have a very realistic look at what it's going to do to the manufacturing community, because many of them are right on the edge, and they're going to close a plant here, and they're not going to reopen it here. They're going to open it somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Campbell.
We do believe that energy efficiency should be considered the first fuel, as it does save consumers and businesses money, and we do have the technology available, widely available today to deliver energy efficiency. We don't believe there's a silver bullet to energy efficiency. We believe there's silver buckshot, and there's going to be complementary measures like the ones that I think we've been discussing this morning, and they're going to give us the opportunity to drive energy efficiency to the level that I think as a nation we need to drive it. I think that energy efficiency is the most important thing that we can focus on when it comes to climate change. We need to make sure that there's alignment of incentives right the way from the utilities to the users of the energy. And I don't think it's ever been more important. I think it's something we have to focus on now.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Wells.
When we think about the triad of economic success, environmental performance, and energy security, energy efficiency hits the sweet spot of those three things. It's a win-win-win. So why aren't we doing more of it? Well, we've talked a lot about the barriers today, and it's clear we need a nudge. We need a push of some sort. So the complementary policies that we talked about today can form that nudge, give us that push we need to do the right things with respect to energy efficiency and help our economy.
Okay, thank you. Mr. King.
I would start with energy efficiency is a resource, and it is a critical resource to meet America's overall energy needs. Secondly, that it is one of the least expensive investments that we have as an alternative to us. So we should be aggressive, both on the targets to achieve as well as the timelines to achieve them, and we stand ready to help deploy and deepen its impact.
Thank you. Mr. Giudice.
I encourage the committee and Congress and the administration to be very, very bold at this time. I cannot imagine, but I suspect that decades in the future we'll be looking back and wishing we were bolder about what we will be accomplishing right now. And I thank you for your leadership on these matters.
Thank you, Mr. Giudice, very much. And we thank all of you, and just an excellent panel today. And I just wanted to, in closing, just say that there has been a lot of talk this morning about the stimulus bill and decoupling, and it was raised by Mr. Matheson as well. So I just thought I would read the language from the stimulus bill so that people can hear it and it's on the record. What it says is that, as enacted, the language requires the governor of a state, as a condition for receiving the allocation for state energy program funds, to notify the Secretary of Energy, quote, in writing, that the governor has obtained necessary assurances that the applicable state regulatory authority will seek to implement in appropriate proceedings for each electric and gas utility with respect to which the state regulatory authority has rate-making authority, a general policy that ensures that utility financial incentives are aligned with helping their customers use energy more efficiently, and that provide timely cost recovery and a timely earnings opportunity for utilities associated with cost-effective, measurable, and verifiable efficiency savings in a way that sustains or enhances utility consumers' incentives to use energy more efficiently. The language does not mandate decoupling. It simply asks states to pursue policies to align utilities' initiatives with the pursuit of efficiency while ensuring that consumers have incentives to pursue efficiency as well. NARUC does support the final language, and there are many ways to satisfy this requirement. It does not require decoupling and allows states to innovate in order to protect their own consumers. So I thank the panel very much for being here today. It is incredibly helpful. Unfortunately, historically, this subject and its discussion is only exceeded by watching grass grow in terms of the level of enthusiasm that it brings to a room. But as you're all saying, it's the sweet spot, it's the first fuel, it's the, the whole key to how we can put a dent in climate change and energy independence issues and economic growth simultaneously. It's important for us to ensure that this year we put the laws on the books that telescope the time frame it will take for us to reach that day. We thank each of you for being here. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you.